I need a place to put it.
Yeah,
Oh, just set it right.
do you want
over there.
to, you
Yep,
can tuck it wherever you feel comfortable.
no, I think you should.
Oh,
Oh,
no.
okay. So I'm going back to say.
Open session. No. You can't. I want. No. Okay.
So back in the open session.
Yes, back into open session to conclude the matter of the investigation.
All right. Stay down, Gary. Okay. No. All right, we're going back into open session to discuss the matter of the complaint. I would entertain a motion.
I move that the board approve the release of the report provided by Jolie Faber Patterson. The final 3 pages of the larger document that was sent to us.
Member Brownell, second.
Having a second, is there discussion?
I think it makes sense. It's a good summary of the investigation. It provides the findings.
Well, so I guess I'd say my preference would have been to release the entirety of the document, but there is some concern related to persons' names being in the report that might not know their name was going to come out. So I guess I'll say this is a reasonable compromise.
I agree.
Tanya. Member Smith,
Yes.
member Goodall,
Yes.
member Schmidt,
Yes.
member Richardson,
Yes.
member Brownell. Yes. Member Wilson.
Yes.
Member Sewell.
Yes.
All right. We'll just roll into.
No, we
To close.
we'll close the meeting.
That was an open session. And we're gonna call to order our general session.
No.
No.
Policy.
Policy meeting.
Committee meeting. I don't know where I'm at the moment.
Right, policy.
We are at a policy meeting. So we're gonna do the pledge of allegiance.
All right.
Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Policy meeting.
Kristen? All right.
No.
Policy. That's not this. Here, it's the report.
Yep.
Yes.
We needed to. That was executive session.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Policy meeting,
Okay.
consent agenda. I would entertain a motion.
Member Schmidt moves that we accept the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Table second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Tanya?
Member Smith,
Yes.
member Dipdahl,
Yes.
member Schmidt,
Yes.
member Richardson,
Yes.
member Brownell,
Yes.
member Wilkins,
Yes.
member Sable.
Yes.
I'm sorry that I mispronounced your name on the last time around.
Yeah. She's ready.
Trish, hand it over to you. Okay. Under new policies review, starting with JFCEB, personal communication devices. At our last board meeting, you had a report on our cell phone survey that we gave to students, staff, and parents. We reported to you some information from that. At the time, there was a little bit of confusion over our current policy, and so in your packet tonight is the policy that you passed 1 year ago next month on cell phone use in the district. And so that cell phone policy, it is not necessarily something we need to revise unless you give us further direction tonight. What we wanted to update you on tonight is from the cell phone survey, what we are doing, particularly at Grants Pass High School, because most of the issues related to student cell phone use are at the high school level. So Michelle's going to tell you some things that have happened recently and their next steps in direction. Our hope is to kind of figure out what is our next step forward. This was the policy that we just revised a year ago. Are we looking at further revision to it? Further constraints around cell phones in the district? Is there further direction we need to go? So first we'll have Michelle kind of share what's happening at Grants Pass High School, and then look for some direction from the board.
So gave a survey to staff asking about kind of technology as a whole, use of Chromebooks in the classroom, use of Chromebooks at home, and then what potentially educational reasons that teachers would use cell phones for. So gathered some data. Lots of teachers, there was no clear decision on classroom set of Chromebooks versus do they like the one-to-one Chromebooks, which is what we have now, but I did ask a question like, why would you use cell phones for educational purposes? We have a variety of classes, some within CTE, like our business with regards to marketing. We actually have a digital marketing class, journalism. Our leadership kids use cell phones for some small things. Astronomy uses a really cool app. I actually use it too. I use it to look at the planets called Skyview. So they use that in astronomy to help with instruction. Avid uses it with regards to scholarships, FAFSA. That whole two-factor authentication has become a thing. So when a kid is applying to college and they need to check their personal email, well, they don't have it on their Chromebook, so they're using their phone, and then they got a two-factor authenticate to be able to get to stuff. So some of those things are true educational purposes for using the cell phone. I did find it interesting that 24 of the 75 teachers said that a lot of times they'll use it because a kid doesn't have a charged Chromebook, or the cell phone works a little bit faster. So Trish and I talked, and we're doing a trial run of, I have about 20 teachers that we're going to give some extra Chromebook chargers and a power strip to, and do a little trial and see if does having some extra chargers in the classroom then eliminate the ability or the need for them to use the cell phone to achieve something rather than being able to use their Chromebook. So we're trying to see if that might be a cost-effective approach to helping kids use their Chromebook. The other thing we did do is on the 17th, which was a clerical day, I pulled the staff together and reminded them of our current cell phone policy, which is no cell phones out during instruction time, which instruction time is bell to bell. So if a kid's in passing period, they're at lunch, they can have their phone out, but while they are in class from bell to bell, there should be no cell phones. I had a few teachers get up and say, hey, here's how I do it in my classroom, just so that people could see some different approaches to how they could manage it. And then I asked them nicely, said, hey, that is my expectation that you follow the policy. So what does that look like for you? What are routines that you're going to put in place? How are you going to structure your classroom to make sure that the cell phones are away when class starts and they don't come back out again until the kid walks out of your classroom? And so I've had quite a few teachers come up and thank me for the revisit to the policy. You know, it's okay for you to use me as the guy that has to be like, you know, NAEP said that we're not
You can
We're
use
not,
us.
yeah, you can use us, it's okay. So far, I think it's going well, and so, you know, being able to allow us the opportunity to make some shifts and to get everyone back on board and reminded the teachers that, hey, we're a team. We all got to do this together. So, you know, if Tommy doesn't follow the policy, but I follow the policy, that doesn't help us out as a team. And so we had some good conversations around that, and I feel pretty confident with teachers feeling comfortable following the policy. And if there is a teacher that's not, then we will address that moving forward. But that's what we've done right now, is try and mitigate some of the reasons why they might use a cell phone in class with the chargers, and then revisiting it as a staff to say, no, this is the policy, this is the expectation with regards to cell phones.
I would just like to say I've had a few students catch me in the community and ask about this new policy, and I was like, it's not new,
Policy.
but it's good to hear.
Yeah.
So,
My apologies, I can't tell time, apparently. 2023 was 2 years ago.
I see
not
that.
last year. It's 2025.
nice.
So, I think what we're asking is that, you know, in terms of our, revisiting cell phones, I think what the high school's committed to is a more clear set of guidelines, conversations with staff and students about the expectations around it, and keeping in place our current policy, but making sure that we're following what we set out in our student handbooks and that we're enforcing that as a whole staff.
I think that's.
I've got a couple questions. So in our current policy, it mentions, so personal electronic devices shall be turned off during instructional or class time and at other times designated by the school. Is there examples of maybe other times? And then I have a second question too.
So at middle school, they're supposed to be off all day long from the moment they walk on campus to off, and then at elementary, not at all. In their possession, and so the policy is meant to capture kind of a K-12. And each level has kind of a different set of guidelines.
Is that,
I would say at the high school specifically, I would maybe lump like study hall into that. So study hall isn't necessarily a time where a teacher is instructing, or that kids are doing specific activities led by a teacher. It's a time to, I gotta go to this class and get help. I gotta make up this test. But the expectation is still the same during study hall, that there is no cell phones out bell to bell, just like they would be in a regular class.
can I interject just on that and then come back to you? Sorry.
Don't forget about me.
I won't, wouldn't dare, but you can talk whenever you want. So Ms. Napier, thank you for kind of reinforcing the policy. I think that's huge. Based on what I saw in the numbers, there's a discrepancy between what teachers and students thought was being
Yeah.
enforced or not. So I think that's great. Did that same conversation happen at the middle schools?
Yes.
And I guess elementary, since there's 4-year-old, 7-year-old.
2-year-old,
youngest,
or whatever,
baby,
yeah.
Anyway,
Not at, they don't have a not.
anyways, I'm just curious if we reinforce the same thing, or I understand how the high school might be the focus, but I was just curious if that happened, especially at the middle schools.
Middle school, I would say, is a little bit behind the high school in terms of the conversation. They have been talking about it. There's been some parents who have made comments about where their middle schoolers, which classes are utilizing cell phones, and then QR codes has become kind of a conversation too. And so they're still trying to refine some things to make sure we're covering all of our bases.
Dustin.
Yeah, question 2. So our policy goes on to say that devices that can take a photograph or record video or audio shall not be used for such purposes while on district property. Has there been any discussion or even anecdotal situations where that's, because that's the in the halls
That's
part
been
of
the
the,
co- That's been the conversation at Parent Advisory Council. Was around leadership classes. Our leadership students videotape each other for morning announcements. It's much easier than some of the other technologies that are out there to put together the morning video announcements utilizing cell phones. And so that has been a point of conversation.
and then as far as describing the level of challenge or problems that we see for non-sanctioned, maybe you might want to call it, activities? Or do we see a lot of challenges there? The lunchtime, during break, between bells, or the other between bells?
Do you have students taking inappropriate videos of other students or egging people on to fight or things like that? Bullying, harassment, that kind of stuff.
Not,
That's what
I
you're
mean,
asking,
is
right?
that what you're at?
Yeah, just trying to characterize the level of challenge, if any, in policing that.
Enforce it. The enforcement of it, not so
Yeah.
much is
Yeah.
stuff happening, but the enforcement of it.
I would say the enforcement of that anywhere, whether it happens inside of school, outside of school, it's, you know, making sure kids are comfortable to tell us when something pops up on, you know, social media in particular. Our passing periods are only 5 minutes long, and so there's not really a lot of dilly-dallying that's happening. Otherwise, they're not gonna get from point A to point B, in a 5-minute period. And lunchtime, we're security's out and about, staff's out and about to try and ensure that the phones are being used for appropriate purposes and not as a way to bully or harass kids.
Was there a library pass? At one point when my daughter came to the high school, I believe, or was it middle school? There was, when this policy kind of really, she was in middle or high school, and there was, you could go to the library and take a test, and you could use, if you were done in class, you could go to the library if you had a license.
That's what used to happen. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it does not. And so, and that's, you know, when our kids,
And
go
that
to-
was-
when our kids go to the library, it's during instruction time, whether it's study
Right.
hall, whether it's during class time. And so the cell phones are not.
Well,
Not
I think that's
out
how they got
yet.
away from using them in class.
Yeah.
Right? If you were done, then you had the privilege.
You could pass the test.
The
you're done.
previous librarian allowed them during use, like, it would be during lunch or during, you know, you were
Got it.
there. So it was, yeah, completely different. But no, they're not.
Just wondered if
When
that
they
was
go to the
helpful.
library, they're also not allowed to
Nice.
have them out, and the library gals do a fantastic job of walking around and make sure that, like, if you're coming to the
Yeah.
library, you're coming to
Good.
play some chess, or you're coming to read books, or you're coming to do homework, or
Not sneaking away to do your.
correct.
I have a question. School culture is going to be defined by the adults, the kids, or a combination of both. If there's inconsistencies amongst the adults in terms of enforcing the policies, school culture is going to break down, whether it's dress code or whether it's cell phone or stuff like that. What is the accountability? In terms of if it's not enforced in all classes, or maybe 25% of the teachers are not enforcing it.
That becomes a conversation between the administrator and the teacher, and this is the expectation that you are following the policies that we have set forth at Grants Pass High School. And if you're not doing that, then we're gonna have a conversation about how we can make sure that that's happening in your
Okay.
class. So
So it gets that serious.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Mhm.
Thank you.
I actually saw it documented in a uni observation feedback today. So, yes,
Today,
yeah, so teachers do hear, are you enforcing the cell phone policy? It doesn't see, why not? Why aren't we following through? So yes.
does it follow with a write-up or something like that?
Mhm.
Thank you.
So I guess I'd say we don't really care if they use cell phones. It's the way they're using them, probably the social media aspect. In the future, because this could be hard, find a way that we could word the policy to say from the time they arrive to the time they leave, that they wouldn't be able to access those social media type things. Some amount of accountability or enforceability is actually pretty straightforward because that stuff's all timestamped. So if they're not allowed to use it from the time they arrive to the time they leave, and then somebody shows you a screenshot of a post from the middle of the day, That's pretty simple to hold somebody accountable. So I'm just thinking about it because really it's the social media aspect that is causing the problem with kids.
Just for clarification, Gary, that was for student accountability? Not staff accountability, because you could, I guess, track what class they were in.
Well,
too.
Actually, the reason I mentioned it is because we had some accountability for an employee being on social media when he was supposed to be working.
Right. But eventually, I mean, you could also tell what class it was being allowed in.
But you can also have your social media posts scheduled to go out. You don't have to, it's not, you have to write it and send it. You can go out anytime, right?
Right, but the disruption of the students is when it's going out.
Yeah.
During the day.
Yeah, one other question. You're gonna have students who have diabetes that are on diabetes pumps and they access their information on their phone. You're gonna have kids who are hearing problems and the phone is used as a tool to be able to communicate. How do they go through the process of being exempt from these?
So if it's a medical, our nurses would send out information to the teachers that have those particular students, and in it will say, this student needs to be able to utilize their phone to check their blood sugar monitor, or if it's a special ed student, it's written into their IEP, the student is using their phone to talk to text to be able to, yeah, so all of those things are
And that's
communicated.
that's a confidential conversation that's had.
Yep.
Our plan is to move forward with the current policy, and we'll report back on our follow through and enforcement across the district. Does that work?
Yep.
Okay.
Continue.
No, I think
improving.
this is a hot topic around the state for sure. And who knows what the legislature might come up with, but I think we can keep with what we have and do our best with it. Until we have to look at it again.
So we'll go on to policy IKF, which is the graduation requirements policy. You have in your packet, the first 3 pages, 4 pages are our current policy. If you would skip past all of that to the OSBA model sample policy. My recommendation to you all today is to basically take OSBA's language changes. So I just want to go over them with you, and I'll just call out the page number on the OSBA policy and the recommendation and the reason why. I've tried updating you throughout the year on the changes to graduation requirements, and this policy really overall reflects the new laws that are in place, new requirements. On page 1, and you'll see this throughout, certificate of attendance. It used to be called the attendance, an alternative certificate. It's now a certificate of attendance. We're going to come back to that concept in just a minute on another page. Some other changes related to foster care and recovery schools is a new law as well. So just embedding that. Page 2 is where you see the credit requirements, the half credit of civics being required. The 1.5 credits of a higher education or career path skills. That's what we call career academy.
You said 1.5 or 1/2?
1/2.
Okay.
0.5. And then 1/2 credit of personal finance being added. So those are the new diploma requirements. If you look at page 3. There are further, besides the credit requirements. They made a change to the law right there, but also the demonstration of essential skills is required. Right now, that is on pause through the graduate through 27-28. That's the footnote at the bottom. And then some changes to the extended application, which we've shared with you how we do the extended application. And the career related learning experience as related. So the graduation requirements that for the main diploma, we would take everything OSBA has drafted there. Right after that paragraph on the diploma is where we would like to insert a paragraph about the honors diploma. We shared with you last time, what the requirements would be for Grants Pass School District Honors Diploma. And just to restate that, any student in the district could earn an honors diploma by earning a 3.5 unweighted GPA. Earn 6 credits in advanced courses such as AP, advanced level, or college level classes. Participate in 11th grade Oregon statewide assessment and have a total of 27 credits, with 25 of those being graded requirements. So we would insert that paragraph.
What page is that?
I gave it to you in the last board packet on this
Okay.
piece of paper.
Okay.
And we would just take that paragraph and insert it right there.
Yeah.
So we talked about the honors diploma. Alicia kind of presented that last time.
Yes.
And we would like to just go with that recommendation and put it in board policy that students could earn an honors diploma.
Okay.
But we don't have a copy here.
I can make one real quick of that. While he's doing that, we'll just quickly look at the rest of the policy. The modified diploma is still an option. And again, it reflects the changes in law with personal finance and higher education being required. I'm turning to page 4. That continues on. Again, we would just recommend taking OSBA's changes. They're very similar to what we just talked about on the regular diploma. If you get down to the on page 5, see a change in the language. This is around essential skills. It's been our practice in essential skills. We would take this language right here and embed it in our policy, and the district will allow English language learners, students to demonstrate proficiency in essential skills in the student's language of origin. We could choose will or will not. We have a history of accepting their language of origin. So when, for example, when they take the writing essential skills, they could write in Spanish and be proficient writing in Spanish and meet their essential skill requirement. On the appeals process, I'm trying not to go through that, but so we have a lot of policies yet. This one has a lot of little parts and pieces. Any questions on essential skills for EL? Again, essential skills are on pause for a while, so it kind of feels funny to talk about these things, including the essential skills appeal process, which the district, we have a history of establishing an appeals process. We don't use policy KL for this. We've had an established appeals process that when a student is found not to be proficient in reading, writing, or math in that essential skill, there was an appeal process that first started with their teachers, the staff, to reanalyze the work sample or the test score, or whatever it was that the student needed in order to meet essential skills. There's a few changes to extended diploma that start on the bottom of page 5 and continue on to page 6, little minor adjustments. It does spell out the requirement for documented history and to annually provide notification starting in grade 5. That was true back on the modified diploma as well, and we already comply with that. Removing alternative certificate and calling it the certificate of attendance. So if you go to page 7, you're going to see some footnotes, and we need to select a footnote definition. How do you get a certificate of attendance? You've maintained regular full-time attendance for at least 4 years, beginning in grade 9. You acknowledge this does not satisfy diploma requirements, and you have a documented history if you look at that footnote for 21, what does it mean, regular full-time attendance? Our recommendation is to take the first definition down in the footnotes. That means it's not being absent for more than 10% of the school days. And that excused absences are considered absences for the purpose of, they don't count against the student. We would recommend excused absences do not count. That really encourages parents to communicate with us about why their student is absent. If they are on the attendance certificate track, we don't just historically, maybe 1 or 2 kids are on this particular completion track. Again, it's not a diploma, it's not a, doesn't qualify for any of the diplomas, but it's a way to honor the student for being at school and participating to the extent possible.
Yeah, probably a silly question, but there are no silly questions, so I'll ask it
Right.
anyhow.
I agree.
The certificate of attendance, we have just such an outstanding graduation rate in the district here.
Yep.
The certificate of attendance does not fit in that at all, right?
No, it doesn't
Okay.
count at all.
That's great.
The rest of the changes, if you turn on page 8, 9, are very reflective of the things we've talked about with just some little minor word adjustments, changing over certificate of attendance, etc. So those would be our recommendations for that policy change. I think you have a copy of the honors diploma.
Yes.
Wording.
Rich, you were saying you wanted that to be, sorry, not you, but the recommendation of everyone that's looked over this stuff to be before the modified diploma on 3-9.
Yeah.
And did we look into the 3.5 unweighted GPA? When I looked on the state website, I saw 3.5 GPA. I was curious why unweighted is highlighted here unless there was another page that maybe, or another document that the state has that says unweighted, or did we just pick that? I know Gary kind of highlighted that last time, that it seems to be a little bit selective.
She said it was on the state page as unweighted, and you saw that it wasn't?
It's not. Yeah,
Okay.
it just says 3.5. I'm curious if we're gonna,
Mine
We're
says unweighted.
No, on the state
on
side.
the actual state website.
Yeah.
The little blurb, there's not a lot of information that I found. I don't know if there's more than that
Oh,
elsewhere to be found.
I would
but-
assume on the state website, it's gonna mean unweighted because not every high school is required to weight like an AP course. That's a choice you make as a district, and so they probably don't specify it on the state site because
It is unweighted, it would say weighted.
it would say weighted, yeah, weighted.
Assumed.
And
Coquille High School, they didn't have a single AP class. There was no waiting.
Mhm.
So, and I would say every single district on the South Coast was the same way. So students wanted advanced courses, they took college classes at Southwest Oregon. That's how.
The point was that if we have a student that takes a ton of AP courses and they get a lot of Bs, that even though they're challenging themselves greatly, they may actually fall under this. I haven't done the math on that but I'm assuming that's a possibility.
You know what I can do is pull all of our current GPAs weighted and unweighted, because every student gets both calculated. And provide us with some guidance and information, looking at some examples of students that fall in those categories that you would be asking
Yeah,
about.
and I mean, this is Gary's thing, but for me, I would hate to see a kid that's choosing academic excellence and rigor and trying to really do their best, but doesn't get the A.
But just not
Yeah,
get there.
understood.
well, but it's worse than that. If it's listed as unweighted, it causes kids to lean away from taking the AP classes, and we don't want that. So just strike the unweighted. Your grants pass, we'll just use weighted GPA.
Yeah, I agree with that. It motivates, it can motivate children to take the lesser, make the lesser effort, but still get the reward.
We'll bring that, we'll, make all these changes in the policy and bring it forward with that and bring some data, for us all to look at and talk about as well.
That first reading or the next meetings.
I think, are there any other changes to the honors diploma besides the data? Because what we could do is just bring it forward to the next board meeting,
Mhm.
because I'd really like to get this policy passed. And then we can, we'll draft it as weighted and then talk about, the data and our recommendation for based on your recommendation, what we looked at in terms of, yeah, you know what I mean?
So first,
Talking about.
I had one more question before we go forward. The essential skill one, that's a weird one for me, and I just wanted more information. And so I don't know if we would move forward or not, depending on how other board members might feel, but the district will allow English language learner students to demonstrate proficiency in essential skills in the student's language of origin for a high school diploma or modified diploma. I just wanted more information on why we would do that. My understanding is our program is awesome and those kids do great. And it would seem that they would be able to prove proficiency in English, not in a prior language or their primary language or their, yeah. So I'd be curious as to why historically, I hear that's what's been done, but I'm wondering why.
Well, and just historically too, I mean, essential skills has not been required for years.
Sure.
And isn't required till 27, 28, or beyond that. Prior, when it was part of our graduation requirements, we maybe had one or two students who were newcomers to our school that were much more proficient in their writing skills, in reading and writing in their native language. And they were able to meet the graduation requirements and met all the credit requirements. But this was a barrier for them. So it's really only ever applied to newcomers who typically are coming in later in their high school career. It's not students who have been in our program throughout. It's really students who are new at our school.
We do a great job with teaching students whose native language is Spanish, English, but we get students that come to us that speak Vietnamese or Hungarian, right? So Russian, so they need a little more help than sometimes our team can give them. Sam?
Not me.
Oh.
I mean, yeah, not it.
My thought is that I know everybody in the room wants our diploma to be a standard, right? And the honors diploma is even, in my mind, like better, like that's awesome, like kind of bummed my son won't have an opportunity to, but anyways, that's personal. So I want our diploma to mean something, and so I'm hearing that somebody coming in maybe as a senior is gonna have a harder time meeting proficiency. But I'm just hesitant to say that we should change or do that differently. I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but I want the diploma to mean something. I don't want our graduation rate to go higher because we lower standards is kind of what I'm trying to say. And that doesn't have to do with, primary language or secondary language or anything like that, but just that the diploma means something and that we're not lowering that standard.
Yeah, I would say that oftentimes the challenge of, and Alicia could bring us some information about students who qualify for the seal of biliteracy and who are super proficient in their native language. What that means and how that relates to this. I wonder if for now, I mean, with it being not required until beyond 27, 28, if there's a need for us to even put it in the policy, the brackets right there, that bracket.
I will say, it doesn't change the level of. Like so we teach just the Oregon State standards, and it doesn't change those standards. So if whatever the high school standards are for essential skills, student. Say they did it in Spanish, that's our most common, language that's not English. They still would meet those same exact standards. It's not changing the level of rigor in math or the level of competency in social studies or, well, maybe we don't do it in social studies, but English. Reading or writing, they still have to read it as, whatever the reading level is, or it just, except for in a different language than English.
This obviously is addressing the exception rather than the rule. It would be interesting to see some kids, some profiles, not necessarily the kids, but profiles of some kids. For example, if they were coming here in the 6th grade or the 7th grade, you wouldn't expect that to occur. But if they come in the 11th grade, that's a whole different thing. But it'd be interesting to see some.
Down in the footnote, bottom of page 5, it does say, therefore, these 2 sections are not required to be in policy at this time. And so we could just hold off until after, and honestly, the state's gonna come out with a change to essential skills. I don't exactly know what it is, and so we're gonna be talking about this again anyways. So let's leave it out of policy for now and revisit it when it's a requirement again, because it's not required for a few years. That work? Okay.
We'll go May.
Leaving it in. I don't mind leaving it in if somebody transfers, some math whiz transfers in
It won't
their
be,
senior year and.
yeah, it won't be something we require them. We don't require it of any of our students right now.
Right.
They don't have to meet an essential skills. They just have to meet the credit requirement and the extended application.
Right, right.
Thank you.
Okay, Bill on the graduation theme. Next one in your packet is IKFB graduation exercises. If you look at our current policy, for the most part, we're gonna keep most of the current policy. I do wanna, well.
Trish, excuse me a second.
Yeah,
Students, if you wanna bug out quietly, you can stay if you want, but if you're
Welcome to leave.
yeah,
You've-
you've met your time requirements, is all I'm saying. Go ahead.
okay. Have I met my time requirement?
No, ma'am.
Sam, put your hand down.
The only real change on IKFB that we're recommending to you today is the certificate of attendance change of language from alternative certificate to. You'll see that there's another change on OSBA sample policy referring to graduating students, the Native American students being allowed to wear culturally significant. If you look at our current policy, we really already have this language, and I don't think we need to change anything with our current board policy. Other than just the change from alternative certificate to certificate of attendance. So those would be the only changes we'd be recommending.
And none of these are, sample,
Yes.
just where it says that.
Yes. Does that make sense?
So starting with graduating students will be allowed to wear.
Well, we don't need to change, because if you look at our current policy, we really kind of already have that covered.
And that is required.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
So what are you gonna do?
gonna change alternative certificate. To say certificate of attendance
In our policy,
in our policy.
okay.
Okay. Ready for the next one? Nathan is not online. I thought he was just.
Yes.
Oh,
Fair.
There he is. He is. Nathan, artificial intelligence. Nathan brought this up a number of board meetings ago, and look, we have a policy. OSBA came out with sample policy for us, and we would recommend adopting it. This would really help us move forward. We have since our conversations this year around AI have really ramped up. Tommy and I are already trying to navigate teacher requests to open different applications that they can access with their students. But we've hesitated because we don't have a policy in place, and this would help us move forward with that. So just in short, it's kind of broken up into several parts. First, it talks about independent student use, which basically says it's not allowed, independent student use. But as part of a class, section 2, it is. There would be a process. We would recommend that where it says, on the under student use as part of this class, the district's IT department, that we would come up with a process that would run through our tech and curriculum department. It's kind of what Tommy and I have been doing already, where we sit down and we look at the application that's being asked of us and determine if it complies with our rules and some of the rules we'll talk about that are further in this policy. That's the first paragraph. The second paragraph is, we really believe that the prior to allowing students to use, we need to keep that language. It's currently bracketed. We believe our teachers, and we at the high school, we've already been talking with teachers about adding this to their course syllabus for next year, having an AI statement on their course syllabus about student use. This would also be applicable. One of our super users is an elementary teacher right now. And so again, how he notifies his parents of the use of artificial intelligence as part of the class. We would also add it, so the second line in that policy, the district school, we would say the school will provide notice, because we want to have this be part of our student parent handbooks. We're also going to have it be part of registration. There will be information about use of artificial intelligence as part of registration. So that's the student use as part of the class, making sure there's a process to approve applications, making sure there's parent notification. And really what the teachers have been talking about is it would not just be an open platform. There would be decision rules about when it's appropriate to use AI for a project, when it's not, how it's to be used. You'll see on the next page, it talks about staff professional development, which we do. We're lucky enough to have some teacher leaders who have already started some of this endeavor work and are working to, wanting to train us and our staff on the use of AI. There's on back to page 1, the staff use component of it, just making sure that district staff know they are authorized to use it, that it is pretty powerful what's available to our teachers to use to help make their jobs easier with artificial intelligence. It's our obligation though on page 2, and why we really want to get this policy in place to make sure everybody knows it needs to be FERPA and confidentiality compliant, that it protects the student information, and that violations of the policy are subject to discipline.
Okay, I'm not a technology native. I'm an immigrant, okay? And I'm an artificial intelligence alien, okay? But I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Okay, question number 1. Are we going to decide which applications can be used?
Yes.
So we will be the monitor of
We are the gatekeeper.
okay, the gatekeeper. Okay, question number 2. And again, this comes from my being an immigrant rather than a native. I'm always concerned about plagiarism, about accurate individual thought and that kind of thing. How do we protect that with AI?
It's pretty.
They use AI tools that detect that.
Well, they used to do that with other programs too, that,
Yeah,
They do.
so a couple of things on that. Currently, we use, our English department at Grants Pass High School uses a product called Turnitin, which is a plagiarism detecting tool.
Yep.
It also will detect when a student's using AI, not just.
oh, we'll do
plagiar-
AI then, because
Yeah.
it does internet, I know that, but.
Yeah. a number of the tools that are available out there have AI to detect AI. So staff development is gonna be really important in terms of, and when Tommy and I are no experts on this. We both look at each other like, what are we doing? Because it's
Sound like
happening so
aliens.
fast to us. But we have teachers who are much more versed and are helping with this work, which feels really good to have some teacher leaders. And there are some pretty powerful tools being developed out there that will detect when artificial intelligence is being used. And we would be looking for that when we're reviewing the tools.
And I think,
Sam?
so,
You better check on that.
just good old fashioned honor system, would always be expected, but I think this is great, and I think it's a great start, and myself, I am not an AI, professional. I'm not an expert, but, I've been studying enough to know that it's something that we have to have our finger on that pulse and at least trying to keep up. So I think creating this policy, having some clarity on when it's okay to use it, when they should not use it, expectations that they should not be using it to cheat. And then especially the piece of, educating the educators, I think is a great start, and it's putting us on a good pathway with it. There's so many applications that can help supplement and help teachers to help kids, like even AI math tutoring tools where you can ask questions and AI can tutor somebody through math. So there's all kinds of applications in the classroom and outside of the classroom. I think having something in the syllabus that lets the parents know what the expectation is surrounding AI is just a good start. We're at least getting some expectations and sideboards around this thing and hopefully educating ourselves more on it. So very cool.
How will the decision be made for what's allowed on Chromebooks?
Well, what we've been mainly focused on is FERPA compliance and that student identifiable information is not shared. So that's been our main focus. We currently only have one AI tool unblocked for students called Magic School.
Cool. Thank you.
I think this is super important. I don't know where I would put myself on the spectrum of expertise, novice. I use it in my work every day. And I think this is the right direction of having some boundaries, because it's really easy to abuse it. Even within my work, I can let the computer do the documentation for me. It's not necessarily what I would write. It may not even be what I want to be written, but I could certainly copy paste it into my notes and it would be really easy. And I'd be compliant with the law, and I don't have to go home with 2 hours worth of paperwork every night. But so anyways, that's something I would just caution, like as I see as a potential issue within my own company and kind of what we're doing. I'm certain that has applications here too. And then also, I'm not sure how I feel about talking to an employee that was asked to write a paper that was written by AI, but no more than 75% AI. This is at a collegiate level. I just don't know. I'm worried about us losing skill sets by relying too much upon AI. That would go for myself professionally, that would go for teachers, that would go for students. So that's just my caution, that I guess that's a caution, not just for the district, but for all humanity, but that we get dumber when we don't do certain tasks, even if they're menial tasks. And so we need to, maybe we need to be working to a higher level period, and those things we don't need to know, but that's just what I see.
The way
And
that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, what levels is it being allowed at, right? I mean, having fundamental skills. Yes, if we don't use it, we lose it, but you have to have it first before, like a calculator. I've seen it, AI compared to calculators. fundamentally is not good. You need to know the fundamentals, but when you get higher, it becomes a tool. And I think that I wouldn't want this obviously too young, too early. But at a higher level in classes used in the right parameters, I think it could be useful. It makes a heck of a shopping list and a meal plan. If you haven't tried.
So I have seen where some expectations has been put around AI, at the community college level and university level, even with my own kids, where it's expected to be a tool. So if you're going to write a paper on something, the AI should not be writing your paper, but the AI can be helping you do the research or verify things on that. And so, and then like was mentioned, I think Trish, you mentioned that, if we really felt like there was the cheating was rampant, or kids were losing skill sets because they were leaning too much on this powerful technology, then we would just have to get better at being able to detect it when it's happening. If it's being used to if it's being used too much as a crutch and not just a tool in doing the education. I agree with what Chad said. Obviously, the concern across the board is that it would keep kids from actually learning how to do things if they're treating it like a crutch. So the overall goal is try to make it a powerful tool. Don't let it take away from the skills we're hoping that they develop.
I think this is an excellent start.
It will be ever evolving.
Why does it say you're gonna refer them to law enforcement?
Huh?
I don't know that, I mean, it's OSBA's language. I'm gonna guess that there's some the legal references might help answer that.
Children.
I think it should just
Question.
end after this.
Make that change, I think, double check.
Yeah, double check with Spencer. Why, I want to know the rationale of
Well,
why.
I think it was something.
I'm in.
Student information being released and inappropriately and.
We already
But
have
you-
that right no matter what with other policies.
Right, you
So
can
we have
take
to
someone's
specifically spell it out. here.
picture of someone's face and attach it to a naked body and things like that, right, through AI. So that would then go to law enforcement.
But your point, Gary, is that if it's already law, why would we put it in a policy? Is that kind of where you're going with that? If we need to follow the law, we will follow the law.
Right.
We're not violating ORS.
And I am not sure that we have hardly any other policies where we have a couple where we talk about law enforcement being involved. But on the use of a new tool seems like a little overkill.
This one.
We're on to admission prices and receipts.
It's my turn. I was looking at board policy a few days back and came across this one that obviously not one that is used very often or talked about very much. It was last adopted in 21 years ago, just about. The reality is the board actually doesn't determine admission prices, I don't believe. I don't think at any point in my 3 years here I've ever brought you the admission prices. Debbie, Gary, can you think of the last time you did do admission prices? OSAA actually sets the prices for athletic events for the state of Oregon.
Only for
OSAA
play,
events.
playoffs.
Yeah, but they send recommendations out too, right?
But they don't determine.
Correct. Anyway,
We
I,
have looked at admission things, especially when we were using special funds to mitigate some kinds of
okay,
fees. And I think it took board approval.
okay. I just didn't know if
That's
this
just
was
kind of my recollection,
right.
you know.
I just know Clay sends me an email every fall and says, this is what the ticket prices will be, and I'm like, okay. But if the board wants that email to go to them, I can have Robert do that in the fall next year.
So do we know what the ORS says about it?
Yeah, I just looked it up. Well, if you see, it's 305 through 565.
So
So that's a
a
lot
lot of
of
numbers.
local financing and education, county
Right.
municipal financial.
And I'm not
College.
wanting to get into a big, long conversation about this policy. I just didn't know how important this policy was to the board to have that first paragraph in there. Or that first sentence.
Why do you suppose it was just focused on athletic events? Because there's other types of events and things that happen at the school that have a admission price.
Correct, and I don't think we
Right.
bring any of those to the board,
Right.
I don't know why.
That's interesting.
right?
Unless mitigating.
I think we want
Funds.
I think we want the principal to have, a plan for adequately controlling the receipts and handling money and all those things, but I have not in my 3 years ever brought anything to the board on an admission price.
And I haven't noticed the absence.
Right. I just didn't know if it was important to you.
Is there an AR attached?
If, nope.
No.
This is the whole policy.
Well,
I'd be in favor of striking the first sentence.
Yeah.
the board will determine admission prices for athletic events based on recommendations of the superintendent.
You just say the superintendent
The superintendent will determine.
will
That would-
determine. Or designee.
The superintendent, the designee.
If the prices go up, we don't want the community mad at us.
Oh, point to that guy.
There you go. And as long as the ORS doesn't reference anything that the board needs to be over this because of a financial reason. Then
250.
let's get rid of it and move on. We don't need to waste a lot of time on it.
Yeah, I don't think we do.
ORS.
So we're going to, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna say the superintendent or designee will determine admission prices, or are we striking the first sentence? I heard both.
Right. I'm saying we should strike the first one because I don't want to get a wordsmithing about other events.
There you go.
Yep.
I'll go.
Thank you, folks.
Family medical leave.
All right, we've reviewed this and approved it at the last committee meeting. And then it went to on our last board meeting 2 weeks ago. Gary had some questions. That we wanted to just make sure everyone, if Gary felt comfortable and everyone else in terms of our definitions of FEMLA, OFLA, and PFML, paid family medical leave, and how that works in practice, with what the law is asking us to comply with, and what contractually we're currently our current practices, and then what this policy is.
Right, so I'm gonna get to my question, which is essentially. The question was, why can't we even have the FEMLA and PLO run consecutively?
They can. So if the handout I gave, I know it's confusing, Gary, and if you didn't say it was, but I'll say it is for you. If you look at the handout I gave you, and you look at the side, not the side with the boxes, but this first side, which starts off with Oregon Family Leave Act. And Family Medical Leave Act, et cetera. And about halfway down the page, changes to OFLA and Paid Leave Oregon. Number 2 is I think what you're getting at. So FEMLA and PLO still run concurrently. And this is coming from the Hungerfords. When the reason for leave qualifies under both statutes, the leave will run concurrently. However, an employee cannot be forced to take paid leave Oregon. As a result, the employee could first take family medical leave without applying for paid leave Oregon, and then could take another 12 weeks of leave by applying for paid leave Oregon. So it's at the employee discretion. And we educate them on that so that they, if they want to do that, this is most commonly applied when they have had a baby. And they have it's usually for probably 95 or greater percent of our employees, if they have the funds available to extend their leave. If they don't, they'll be on protected leave, but without pay. So if they wanted to, Gary, they would first take FEMLA, which of course is unpaid, but if they have sick time available or any other paid leave available, they can use that during that time. And then they could start their paid leave Oregon time. The answer is they can.
Okay, so our new recommended policy has a sentence that says, any leave taken under FMLA must be taken concurrently with any leave taken under FMLA when for the same purpose.
So at the beginning of that paragraph, leave taken under OFLA, Oregon Family Leave Act, is in addition to leave taken under paid family leave with PFMLI and cannot be taken concurrently. However, OFLA leave or PFMLI may run concurrently with leave available under ORS 653, et cetera. FEMLA and other types of leave if provided by the district. And what it comes down to, Gary, is it's on the back side of the page I gave you. It's really about the qualifying conditions that the Oregon Family Leave Act has many more qualifications in terms of an employee being able to take leave. FEMLA is more limited. So OFLA, if you see there, pregnancy, disability, home care for the employee's child, and it goes on to define that. Bereavement leave to deal with the death of a family member, Oregon Military Family Act. And then it gives some dates there.
Well, so I guess it comes down to by having the sentence in there that says it must be taken concurrent. Is that because the law says it must be, or because the district is putting that restriction on it?
We are not putting it with every legal, our two attorneys we would reach out to for that have both. And that answer changed. I think I've shared this last meeting, literally mid-year last year, the interpretation changed. First, they said you must take it. And then they said, well, if the employee chooses, because they would like to take FEMLA first, they may do that. And so we changed our practice at that time. It was February of 24. So it's been a year now.
So do we have to have that sentence in there?
I don't know that we do. Probably respect.
So you want the whole last sentence? Here?
Yeah.
And you leave checking. Yes.
Because in practice, we're not doing it.
Which sentence are we striking?
Last one, the last paragraph.
The bottom of page 2-3.
Any leave
Any
taken
leave
under.
taken. Mhm.
Well, the catch.
Yeah.
It's the
I'm good. If everybody else is, otherwise. ask you the
You're
question.
good, we're good.
Burn you on this one, Gary.
Yes.
We have two ARs that are required board review, IDBAF and AHFE.
All right,
Vanessa.
so we'll do ADBAF, special education supplements first.
Yeah, so brief
Mhm.
segue by the superintendent that here at District 7, we're doing policies and you and the district office are doing AL,
Correct.
except when
Except with that list that I gave you at the last board.
the law requires the board
Correct.
to do ARs.
Yes.
These two are required ones to share with you. So the first one about special education, the changes that will be, my recommendation is we take the highlighted changes and insert them into our policies are due to Senate Bill 756 and Senate Bill 819 that have passed. So the first one, if you look on OSBA sample policy, page 110, it talks about this includes all district employees assigned to work with a student with specialized needs. Do you see that highlighted paragraph? So that's due to Senate Bill 756. So that's a required required language that needs to be in our AR. The same is true on page 310. Participation by other employees, that's due to Senate Bill 756. We've already removed the highlighted pink. That's a Senate bill that sunsetted in 2023 on the OSBA policy. And then if you look on page 9/10, there's a line about assistive technology. So the district does purchase some assistive technology to pilot with students, especially around augmentative communication devices. Basically, we kind of call them talkers, but they're called AAC devices where students can be programmed to be their voice. And so sometimes we'll pilot those with kids and have them take them back and forth from home to school to see if they work. And then our SLPAs work with the families and their insurance to get them their own. But that's why that one is in there. And then finally, on the last page of the OSBA policy, the abbreviated school day, that's in response to Senate Bill 819. So these are things that we're already doing because the law requires us to, but it needs to be put into our administrative. Questions about that? So keeping everything that we've got in our policy, adding the shaded language that OSBA recommends. Gary.
Page 9. Can be
Of which
on a case by case basis.
about the district
Assistive.
purchase assistive technology?
Right, I'm
Okay.
trying to see how that's different than the original.
How many pages? Gary, take a guess.
I see that it's the same.
It's the same, yeah.
7 industrial.
I'm guessing we might have adopted that the last time.
We may have in
Yeah.
2022.
Just missed that one, Gary, sorry.
That happens sometimes. I don't know why, but
Not all districts allow that.
Okay.
So does this mean if when they cease to attend the district, the assistive technology goes with them? Or does not?
It comes back to us. It's usually, it's typically only used for a short pilot time.
Okay.
And then we help the family get their own. Through their insurance.
Okay.
It's a process though, to figure out which one works best before you put out a lot of money. There's lots of different programs that we use to try to see which fits the student best. Especially our pre-verbal ones. Yeah. They're very verbal. The sounds don't always make. Connected conversation. Questions, any other questions about that one? And then the next one is around reporting child abuse. Right? This is another one that's required. We spent a lot of time on the policy for this over the last couple of times. So here are the big changes in the policy. So in our current policy, we have JHFE-AR3, which actually is this old form that's going to be deleted and will be replaced by one that looks like this that's already being used. It's just a documentation. That's one of the, that will become JHFE/GBNAB/AR3. Okay. The second one is reporting suspected child abuse. JHFE/GBNAB/AR2.
I don't have two.
Looks like this one.
It's not,
When we already used this one.
okay, it's just not in the packet.
Okay,
Yeah. that's
so this is the record of when law enforcement or DHS comes on campus, we keep a record of who they found and who they talked to. Didn't get your copies of these, sorry.
Annie? Any Valley?
Yep. They were only these.
My personal assistant.
She's so good. And there were a lot of changes to the JHFE/GVNAB policy. And by all of those changes that needed to take place, the way things were reported, when they're re-reported, my recommendation is to delete ours and adopt theirs with all the updated references to the laws. If you look on the OSBA sample policy AR1 and look on the bottom where it says, sorry, look at mine, look at the one you have. The one you put in, Tanya has all the changes, right? Yes, yeah. So on the bottom of page 1, we inserted the Director of Human Resources. Congratulations. That's the first bracketed or the first replacement on the second page. It's highlighted in yellow, the changes. My recommendation is to use the word shall prohibit the contractor. If there's a suspected abuse by one, we shall prohibit them from coming in until the investigation's been completed. And a determination by law enforcement or DHS says that it's unsubstantiated. On the second paragraph in the bottom, there's another yellow highlighted. That just talks about they have to go through the appeal process set forth by the collective bargaining agreement. So far, so good.
Any reason for the bold words that appear periodically?
That bold one was actually mine to show that it was the shall and not the may for Tanya.
Well, we got any child, any person must, if the Director of Human Resources.
Okay, so the human resources is me holding it for Tanya to know that's a change that we're making. So it doesn't mean it'll stay folded, it just was a.
Good, as long as all the bolts go away.
Yeah, yeah,
Could we just always bold Director of Human Resources?
yes, I think we
Highlight
should. I think we should highlight it, make it bold and shiny.
Phone number,
Thank you.
Routing number.
And
home address.
I think that the reason why any child is highlighted instead of saying like a student, because we actually have an obligation if we're out in the community and we see abuse. We're mandated reporters then as well. We all are, you know, we've been through that training. So that's why it says any child and doesn't specify. And then any person is that same thing. It's broad. It's beyond the scope of just the school. That makes sense. So I'm guessing that's why they bolded those. I didn't bold those two. Those came bolded.
They'll get it.
Sure.
They'll get unbolded.
If the bolding bothers you, Gary, we can unbold.
I
bolding.
said no bold.
Can you
I crossed
unbold?
it out. I'm gonna say no bold.
Gary, send it back to him. Gary said no bolding.
On the
That's for you, Gary.
on page 3, 4. There's a bold, there's a highlighted in yellow. I recommend that we keep that, which aligns with what we've been doing. That a substantiated report means a report of abuse that the law enforcement agency or DHS determined is founded. So I would keep that, I recommend keeping that bracketed information. And then same with down at the bottom where it says cooperation with the investigator. Keep that bracketed language that's highlighted in yellow. Points to that's one. One policy, 3 ARs.
Let me ask it, let me ask a question if I
Yes,
could, though.
I'm ready.
I want to get back to Gary's unbolding. And I'm not promoting bolding. I would promote clarity because this is a school policy. This is a policy for schools. And some may assume that any child may be just in the area where you work or in the school, that you either put in parentheses or add a addendum to it of some sort. Any child, whether in the school or in the community or whatever the case may be, however you want to write that. And the same with any person. I would clarify that that is not just mean in the school setting.
Well, I think our mandatory reporter.
I think by virtue of saying any child is much more broad.
I know it's broad, but I'm not sure that you're going to assume if you're working in a place that that's going to mean anything more than any child in the place that you're working. I'm just throwing that out there.
Any child within your experience?
Well, it says any
Something
district
of that
employee
nature.
having reasonable cause to believe that any child with whom the employee comes in contact. So if anywhere,
Yeah, but when you say
Has suffered
the
abuse.
employee comes in contact, the employee is thinking that they are an employee at that time.
Does it affect?
He just wants to clarify that it doesn't matter if you're in the school or out of the school.
Okay. So can I look into that about some possible languages? and I can
Oh,
get
yeah,
back
yeah,
to you?
yeah. I mean, I don't expect
Yeah.
the word special right now, but it's just.
And instead of trying to do something really broad like that, you could point it toward the mandatory reporter law,
For, okay.
which defines all that stuff.
So if you're on vacation somewhere
Your mandatory.
in a foreign country,
They have slightly different, I don't know what the mandatory reporting laws are. in other countries, but- Crazy.
But nationwide, yeah, not just right. If you hear a story. If you hear
See
something,
something, say something.
not just.
Yes.
I'm just pointing something out on the conversation of page 2, the bold word shall, it's in the
Yes.
kind of third paragraph down.
Again, I bolded that. It wasn't actually bolded by them.
But you said it was,
Area.
was it may or an
The
option for
choices
may?
were may or shall.
I just read it from the standpoint of if the word may was in there, I still feel like we have all the teeth because of the next sentence. But maybe have the ability to. Not disregard, but like if somebody's maliciously making a abuse report or. I'm just looking a little bit at the not the rights maybe, but entitlements of a contractor, agent or volunteer. And somebody just says, oh, they make a frivolous report, and then it's saying that we shall prohibit them.
Until. And then if you read this last sentence, this district may reinstate. Once they're cleared, we can reinstate them. I think we want to err on the side of the kid.
I think we have that ability in the second sentence, because it says if it did say may, the second sentence makes a lot more sense. If it says shall, it's redundant, but if it says may prohibit the contractor, agent or volunteer, then we have the ability to evaluate it. And it says if the district determines there is reasonable cause to support the report of suspected abuse, the district shall prohibit the contractor, versus it just reads a little bit like guilty before proven.
Well, I
innocent.
think what it's establishing is that if you get a report that there's suspected abuse, that you need to separate that entity or individual from the possibility of abusing again. So it's
Until.
Right, until there's a determination of reasonable cause to support the report of suspected abuse. So it's basically saying the district has a responsibility of having a wall between the potential abuser and the potential abused.
Yeah,
That's what
And-
the shall do.
I would agree with that.
It's only
Abundant.
for the period of time between the report and the district making a determination.
I think in light of what's been going on around the state, I would rather have stronger
Mhm.
boundaries around it
Yeah.
than less personally.
It sort of takes the ambiguity out of it, because if you're left wondering, gee, what do I do? Should I tell these people not to come? The policy is saying, yes, you will prohibit the contractor or agent from providing services. So I think that helps, helps limit liability by taking that action.
It doesn't say we have to publicize everything, just says we're
Yeah.
gonna do that until then.
Yeah,
But does it help to add a word in there so it doesn't appear redundant? Shall immediately prohibit the contractor? Does that help differentiate the first sentence from the second sentence? Because if not, I do see the redundancy as well. I also appreciate the separation of someone that could be abusing someone from that person.
This, when it
it's even
says,
stronger. I like it. Yeah, and it differentiates it.
So we're keeping shall?
you can show,
So
adding-
now he's asking to
he's asking about adding another.
That's the whole point, right? Is that we're.
immediately.
Yeah. When we
As soon as
receive
we
the
receive the
report,
report, that's what we're doing, not.
yes, when we receive
Not
the
when we want
report,
to.
the district prohibits the,
Yeah.
that's what it's doing right now. So when we receive the report, the district prohibits the contractor from providing any further services to the district until. That's what that person says. So do we need to add immediately if it's already, when we get it, we do it? Asking for input from everybody.
Thank you.
Nodding to which thing though?
Yeah, when we get it, we act on it.
Well, yeah,
Right.
He wants to
So
add
he's-
immediately.
what they're wondering is, should we add the word immediately? Upon, so immediately, when the designee receives a report. Shall immediately,
The district
is that what
shall
you're saying to put it?
immediately prohibit the contractor.
For shall.
Yeah, shall.
Of course, if they're already there or on site, you would have them leave.
Correct.
I don't
Any,
think, I think.
any questions about the two forms that, I'm sorry, those didn't get too soon. They are 3 and AR2.
So do you see any contract? Tommy, do you see any contract
Yeah.
implications on
That was good.
escorting somebody from a job site?
No, I mean, that's standard for us. We do background checks before they're allowed to do the work, and then we'll restrict if necessary.
That was the other. Something, yeah.
So I had a question on the top of 4.4. So is it,
Which one? Sorry.
The last one.
yeah, 4.4, do investigators refuse to sign forms sometimes?
I mean, I think they could. I don't think we ever have it. But. Depending on. How they're feeling about themselves, we can just write on the form, they refuse to sign. We can't deny them access even if they don't sign it, as long as they're showing us their badge, showing us who they are. But. I've never had somebody refuse to sign it. Usually they're like, yep, no problem, give it here, let me fill it out. Have you guys ever had somebody refuse to sign it?
Never even heard of it.
Yeah, I haven't either, but it's just part of the.
Language, okay.
Yeah. So, any questions on these two?
Okay, so you're gonna look at wording,
Or, yeah, we're gonna check, we're gonna add immediately after the word shall.
okay. And you're gonna look at wording on that front top
On
part.
that, any child in the, yep.
I would like to take a break. Even though I already did. So, let's take a break for 5 minutes. If anybody else?
Can we have a recess policy approval?
Like we go play on the playground?
Remember that every.
Got a raise?
Yeah. You.
Your salary double.
My raise was 50% more than yours.
The policy committee meeting. All right, I want to start off with saying, thank you for everybody being here. And with a quick reminder that we're working off of the OSBA sample draft that we were working off last time. During the last meeting, we worked on the introduction. We had a straw poll that led to a consensus. And then after the meeting, Tanya sent out a draft asking for any changes, and there were none. So I think that that puts us to the definitions. And I think I would like input, but I'd like to go through the definitions kind of with the same strong yes, strong no. I think we can move through them fairly quickly. I believe they are based in law. Which they should get out a little more comfortable. They are based in law. If anybody knows different. So. I also have in my notes that we should use superintendent's superintendent. You're so cute. Superintendent Sweeney's rule of 7. So I'm just gonna, does that sound good? Okay. For a definition. Here's not good.
Nope, that's good. I have a little piece that I want to put right on the front there. Definition.
In front of definitions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, or at the beginning of definitions or something.
Okay.
So what I have written is, all materials listed in the definitions shall meet the selection criteria of this policy. No matter how the materials are selected, staff are subject to disciplinary action up to and including dismissal for violations of this policy.
No pressure, Tanya.
None at all.
No, everybody's watching.
Okay, run that by me again.
I'm waiting to see it.
Oh,
Are you visual or auditory?
I thought you did a great job.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do.
So we probably should use our thumbs on that one. How's everybody feeling? Unhappy? Unhappy? Okay. Care to share?
Well, I would make a slight comment that the language like that appears 21 other places in our policies. 2 of them are kind of duplicates, so we would say at least 19 other times in our policies, we have a statement like that.
I think we just had one tonight.
Yeah.
See as well. And a review.
you can't just take your word for it. I'd have to see what you're talking about. And I would have to say. Yeah, it's giving me a little bit of heartburn. And I'm not ecstatic over it, and needful information.
The one we reviewed tonight was IKJ, students and staff in violation of policy related rules may be subject to discipline. Gary's went a little further. That was one example.
This is a, we have to agree, much stronger wording than what you just showed me.
Yeah. Gary said there's how many more? 21 other policies.
Yeah.
Policies I have. Do they have, I haven't looked through them. Do they have dismissal?
We're
Yeah.
going to be looking at this again after tonight, obviously.
Absolutely.
So it'd be interesting for me just to see the other policy, some of the other policies that have that. I just think, you know, we want to make sure that it's consistent.
And it seems like. So this, you just showed me one example, but that was at the end, not at the beginning.
Okay,
The policy.
you want to put it at the end?
I'm just slowly coming up with, okay, why is this disturbing to me? And so that was number 2.
Okay,
Other policies.
Wow.
That's okay. I'll send it out tonight.
That occurred to me too, Debbie, and I was just gonna ask you, Gary, why you think it would go. This is you have it going above definitions. Why you would have it going there?
He's
could
good either way.
be, could be above there, could actually be under the heading definitions, because it talks about the materials listed in the definitions. And we're gonna have the definitions under that.
And so I think you're right. It's not the last time.
Yeah.
That we'll be looking.
So it'd just be good to, just good to see if it's a.
Okay. So we will revisit that. So let's, core instructional materials. Are we good? Thumbs up, down?
As I read through this one, one of the things that I thought was not listed at the end, whereas others say where the materials are. Who they're coming from. It seemed like a sentence at the end that says these materials are adopted by the board would sum up that definition nicely to me.
Added to this sentence here,
At the bottom.
added to the one that I just added in yellow.
Nope.
No, or.
So we moved on, right?
Materials.
Core instructional materials. I just made a note to add these materials are adopted by the board at the very end of the paragraph.
Okay, sorry, this does not go as quick as I need it to, so.
As I recall, sorry, I made these notes months ago, again, restated earlier, but a number of them say where they're selected, who they're selected by. That one didn't.
And that was also a comment I had about the OSBA version. It would be a lot clearer if the last sentence of each definition said who was adopting the material.
I agree.
They're adopted and paid for by the district.
Well,
Yeah, I don't care. It just. To me, it seemed like they were kind of in funny places throughout all the paragraphs, like it looked like a draft that still needed to be polished. So I just put it at the bottom, but yes, it would fit there too.
But no.
so like for each definition, the first one would say, these materials are adopted by the board. Every other definition would say, these materials are not adopted by the board. And in any of the definitions where they stuck that in the middle, move it to the end. That was kind of the only change I had to the definition.
So Chad,
That's kind of what I was,
On all of
Talk
the
about
example
setting it.
policy.
right, yeah, it says in the, at the end of the first sentence on that core instructional material sentence, after or any part of, footnote does say referring to instructional materials which must be adopted by local school boards. So
So we want
now,
it.
do you want that just moved up into this?
yeah, I think it should be in the definition, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so give me the sentence again, please.
And you want it at the end,
Consistently.
I thought it made sense, but
okay?
there's also a sentence in there that says print textbooks and are adopted and paid for by the district, right? That's middle of the sentence. Core instructional materials may include adaptive or personalized learning programs, digital books and print textbooks and are adopted and paid for by the district.
That's not what I.
Maybe if we were gonna modify it, I would keep it at the bottom and maybe delete that and are adopted and paid for by the district, maybe put it all at the bottom. Gary, is that different than what you were thinking?
And I don't. I was just having, my OCD monk. moment.
Keep it the same, have it the same throughout, yeah,
Yeah,
agreed.
and the wording there is a little screwed up, that textbooks and printed textbooks and are adopted and paid for by the district.
AI did it.
Did it? Did
Okay,
it?
okay, I did-
Did it or didn't
I
it?
was it to hear.
Yeah.
So it's
That's
just
what
not
it's
saying,
through.
it has to be. pointed to
Yeah, somebody had the
instructional
AI.
materials not to be adopted by local school boards. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, no, it went away.
Sure.
Up under core,
Appreciate it.
right from the core over there.
So if we were to delete the last part of that sentence that we were just talking about, and at the end say, these materials are adopted by the board and paid for by the district. Does that fix that?
Well, if you're thinking about putting at the end of these definitions, who's responsible for selection, then it seems like the first sentence under that's in yellow up here should be at the end of core instructional material instead of at the top.
Wait, you're talking about a different sentence altogether and moving it in there?
I'm saying, you want to put who's responsible for selection.
Yeah, and the reason for that, and I think this is what Gary is also talking about, if you go down to the next paragraph, supplemental instructional materials. In the middle of that paragraph, it says these materials are not adopted by the board. I would suggest putting that at the end of the paragraph, not in the middle, and I'm trying to just do the same thing for the first paragraph, so that it's in the same place.
But
It really has nothing to do with the highlighted yellow section, but we
What-
can talk about that more if you want.
What I think Debbie is pointing out is that top saying the board is legally responsible for the selection of instructional materials. How does that compare to the different versions of saying adopted here and not adopted here? That sound like your question, Debbie?
Well, yeah,
No,
I can-
that part, but now I get.
I can see your point wanting to have the same kind of who's responsible in the same position, but it seems to me if we're gonna do that, that first sentence should be at the end of the core instructional material definition instead of the first sentence from the policy.
Or another way of saying that is, does the sentence saying that the board is legally responsible for the selection of instructional material still apply to supplemental and school library materials? Or is it creating some form of ambiguity by saying up top it's legally responsible for selection and then down below saying it's not adopted by the board? How do you clarify that?
When you go back to the original preface, I guess, it says the term, this is reading from the OSBA model sample. The term instructional material includes core instructional materials, supplemental materials, school library materials, and classroom library materials. So OSBA defines all those things as instructional material. So I think what, you know, in statute, it says the board is responsible for adopting instructional material, which is typically seen as core curriculum. But I think they're putting these statements in here under these other definitions to just to make a statement as, you know, this has been general practice. I mean, there's statute that says boards adopt core curriculum. There's not statute that says that boards adopt these other things, but they are conflating those other things in with core curriculum. It's kind of an interesting, so it makes it unclear. I don't know if you guys are following me with that.
So do we unmuddy the waters by using that sentence that's not currently on our working policy? The term instructional material includes core instructional materials, supplemental materials, school library materials, and classroom library materials.
We could just put that sentence back that OSBA suggested. And then in practice, you know, obviously that's how it works out, is it done in practice is, you know, yet to be determined. But we could put that sentence back to help. I don't know if it helps clarify it or makes it worse. I don't know. Chad, what are your thoughts on that?
What lost?
I mean,
Yeah.
basically what if you look at the 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down on the OSBA model sample policy, it says the term instructional material includes core instructional materials, supplemental materials, school library materials, and classroom library materials. So they're conflating all of those things under the definition of instructional material. Now that's not saying, you know, whether or not the board has to adopt all those things, but that is the definition that they're giving.
And it could be moved to the top of the definition section. It's not really part of that introduction.
I would leave the definitions alone.
So
And the only thing we're gonna say is whether we adopt them or whether they're done by some other process.
Cause it's not.
You're welcome to look at this if you don't have a copy of it.
So which one is that? Which version?
What's the model sample?
So it's just caught us up. It's part of the introduction that we removed. So when
Last
Nathan
time.
talked about adding the sentence back. Correct.
Okay.
And
I
you
was
could,
really
you could
lost.
put that under definitions, but that sentence, you know, OSBA conflates all of those things under the definition of instructional material. And like I said, that's not a determination of how they get approved. It's just, that's the definition they provided.
My original is.
Yeah, if as long as it explains it. Yeah.
Then how do you reconcile selection of bills, which is the term adopted, not adopted? So
Well, that's what this is. That's
we're
what it's
responsible
called.
for selection, and down here it says adopted.
Yeah, so
So was it?
Okay, so
There's conflict there, but.
we all,
I think this is for.
well.
I don't have a copy of
Responsibility,
the
authority.
sample policy that,
It's stating the board's overall
Well-
material on our watch.
here, can you?
I don't think this is the latest OSBA model sample policy.
We don't, there's only one OSBA sample policy.
So this is it.
Right. So when Nathan says putting sentence back,
I don't, is he talking about, Nate, is he talking about OSBA's first sentence?
Yes.
Or your first? sentence?
No, it's the
Oh,
fourth
SBA.
paragraph down.
Yeah, the OSBA
OSBA
version,
sample.
just for the sake of definitions, it conflated all of those things under the title instructional material.
Don't know what this is, but it's not the
Well, this is one we received. And I don't know.
I had emailed you guys at the last meeting, that very first section, you reworked it, and this is where you landed, what you wanted to do.
Right.
So I was asked to take that out and just show you what you guys did, so that you weren't confused by all the other language. Well, now we're going back to that. And we're looking at all the other language, and he's referencing that, but that's not before you. That's why I'm.
that's why we're confused.
That's why we're confused, so
Right.
we're gonna make copies of that now.
Sounds fantastic.
You'll know that.
So I need more clarity on with the footnote. And Gary, you're saying it was your monk moment because we just want it to be consistently placed, whether we do or we don't in the definition spot.
Right. Who does the adopting?
Because if you continue on down, the next three paragraphs state who does or does not adopt. So if you look at school library materials, the last sentence, these materials are not adopted by the board. Classroom library materials, these materials are not adopted by the board. So it seems,
Consistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
and consistently at the bottom would make sense with the other two paragraphs that were drafted.
Okay.
So is that,
Made it more difficult than it.
so is that in, so a statement like
Right.
these materials are not, oh, I'm muted. Oh.
I like the exceptions.
Well, to be consistent. If you're going to say instructional materials must be adopted by the board, and then supplemental instructional materials. It should be who they're instructed by, not the negative, these materials are not adopted by the board.
That is OSBA sample policy. They have that in there. So that's what they're saying is, oh, but really, they're only saying bring the footnote reference who adopts instructional materials to the actual paragraph. To make it, because everything else is consistent with who does and who doesn't, except for this first core instructional materials. So it's really just bringing the footnote up and not reference.
But
I think it would make more sense, rather than the negative, it would make more sense to say, these materials are selected by professional educators using selection criteria. Something like that.
well, they've got the sense that they contain material to supplement or differentiate and are generally teacher selected. So you're saying move that sentence down if you want to be consistent with who selects.
No,
Well, I'm just saying, if consistency is motive, it would make sense to me to move that sentence down to the end.
this is the board policy. The only thing we're trying to say is that core instructional materials is a board action.
Right?
The other three definitions are not board actions. We're not trying to say who's doing it, how it gets done. We're just defining the material.
Who's
and
responsible?
Making the distinction that this one set, because the law says so, the board's gonna actually adopt it in a board meeting. The rest of them are not done in a board meeting.
Right.
Moving the
Well,
footnote.
with that, Gary, because the statute says core curriculum must be adopted by the board, it needs to be in there. On the other definitions, you don't even really need to address it because that will be worked out in the rest of the policy in the implementation part of it. And
I agree with that.
and in the AR.
Sure, that's fine too.
So Tanya, just to be clear, is this your working draft? Up on the board? So that first highlighted needs to either say core instructional,
It should just say.
or it should just say these,
It should say.
because you're already in that section defining these materials. No, these materials.
Yeah, just materials.
And yeah, I like what Nathan said. Then if you're just muting the other ones, it's clear that's the only one that is required, and the other ones, it's not.
So are you wanting?
Just
to
delete the other
remove
ones.
These materials are.
Yeah, I just delete them because those will be spelled out in the process.
What
And in
will
doing
you-
that, did you delete the and up above? And just put a period there?
I realize that you are talking faster than this computer wants to. Hold on just a second. I'm right now removing these materials are not adopted by the board.
That was. Nathan and I said that. Does any other board member have a strong opinion on that?
That makes great sense.
No, perfect.
I would not, just as a side note, personally, I would not advocate for the board trying to adopt those things. I don't think it would be efficient for anyone, especially the teachers. But I think the board does reserve the ability to do it. There's nothing prohibiting the board from adopting other supplementary materials. So, the process, it's going to spell out in the process that professional educators are going to be selecting this stuff. They're going to be using criteria that the board sets, and because that's our responsibility. But yeah, we're not going to be in the business of trying to select all that stuff.
You go back to the
So fourth line down of core materials,
core instructional materials.
core instructional materials, it says print textbooks, and then we would put period
Unless
and
you want to
delete
say,
the rest of that sentence,
unless you want to say and paid for by the district.
unless you want to, yeah.
Textbooks.
And under core instructional materials, where?
Fourth line down,
Here.
I know you're seeing it. It's cut off on my screen.
Oh, really?
Yes, so that's
Weird.
That's another one of my issues in doing that. So core instructional materials, what?
so it's the sentence that says core instructional materials may include adaptive or personalized learning programs, digital textbooks, and print textbooks. I'm saying period, delete the rest of the sentence,
But why?
because that's the sentence we just put in at the
It's a
bottom.
massive run.
I'm switching to this, the old school way right now. For you guys, okay? Well, for me, and then I'll make sure you see it.
Perfect.
And you're doing a great job, Tanya.
Thank you, Jack.
Using thumbs on the next one.
Enthusiastically.
Supplemental instructional materials, where it's good. Back.
The only thing we haven't followed up on is the idea of, do we just go ahead and include that definition of the umbrella instructional materials? Can't hurt, can it?
Where?
I would just,
Under definitions.
I would just put OSBA's definition back in under definitions, not back in the header.
Back in under the supplemental instructional materials, add the
We're just
sentence,
at the top.
add the sentence, the term instructional materials includes core instructional materials, dot, dot, dot.
Yeah, I would put that
Yeah.
first.
Put that directly under definitions. The first thing under definitions. Yes.
And the definitions in front of core instruction.
And minor thing, just to be consistent, you don't need to say the term like they did, because we're just listing, quote, instructional material, unquote, definition.
And am I keeping Gary's sentence? Sorry, Gary, am I keeping that sentence that I added?
Yes.
It's going to be reviewed. It's not,
Right,
you know,
it's all gonna be reviewed and I'm gonna make it pretty and. Okay.
You feel confident in all the definitions?
No,
Have we made it to past supplemental instructional material?
oh yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted under definitions. Other materials means any materials which may be accessed by students not covered by another definition,
Not.
just another definition. Catch-all.
You want an extra
Do you
definition
want other materials?
that they.
It's
Read it
just,
to me.
it's just a catch-all. Other material,
And
not
where?
covered by some other definition.
At the end, another definition.
At where?
Is that term used somewhere in the policy here?
No,
Are you planning to add
no.
the term
It's
somewhere else
just-
in the policy?
If you're trying to avoid the policy, you pick something that's not defined. And you say, this thing isn't defined by the policy, so it's not covered.
Covering the bases.
So I'm saying, other materials means any materials which may be accessed by students not covered by another definition.
Wouldn't you have to change the definition of instructional materials as well now?
No,
That's kind of a catch-all at the end.
Because the policy is on instructional materials. We've defined instructional materials as core, supplemental, school, and classroom library materials, but not other.
okay. I go with your inescapable logic. So fix the other sentence too.
Say that sentence for me again, Gary, other material. I don't have that one.
He's making it up.
Other materials.
Okay.
and where is this coming from? Is this after the definitions and before core instructional materials?
It is a definition, just like supplemental instructional, school library materials.
But yes, Debbie, right
So
below.
you're saying right below classroom library materials, you're gonna put other
Materials
material?
means any materials which may be accessed by students not covered by another definition.
Not covered by.
Another definition.
Final answer.
What?
Full cast.
And that's going to be right after classroom library materials.
It should be treated and formatted as another
Yes.
definition.
Yes, underneath classroom library materials. Okay,
Sure.
thank you.
Okay. For instructional materials.
We are on the back, right?
For instructional materials, yes.
So at this point,
First,
I'm gonna say we need to insert selection criteria.
before core instructional materials,
Right.
so a new seven, okay?
Yeah.
Does everybody?
Yep.
Agree?
No,
Do we know what selection criteria is?
no,
Well, we're
Neither.
supposed to create it. The OSBA draft policy references several times established selection criteria. And the current IIA policy has established selection criteria, and so that's what we're going about trying to do.
Well, can you see the screen?
Can't see it.
What would you?
Anything can you see?
Oh, this I'm still on the definition.
That's right.
I can barely see it, but
Oh, I got my own copy now.
Yeah, no, it's okay. You're welcome to use my. Still.
Can I get a copy of that?
Okay.
Whatever, yeah,
What is that?
selection criteria.
From where?
And who's it from?
I don't know.
It's from Nathan.
We don't want that one, we want something else.
Yeah,
so the OSBA policy references selection criteria. The current IIA policy has selection criteria. The idea would be for the board to come up with some selection criteria, and this is some that's been weighed in by some other board members. But if there are,
our board member?
well, that's what we're doing right now. The intent is to go through it and talk about it. And, you know, add some, or see what we like or don't like.
Waiting for a copy.
So if anybody needed the follow-up on selection criteria, that was the one thing as I read through this OSBA policy, like I highlighted every time I saw selection criteria listed, but there was no selection criteria, hence we need to create it.
Well, that's because it's left for the local boards to do that.
Which I think makes a lot of sense, but anyways,
Can you give it like a couple examples?
yeah, page 2-3, in the third paragraph down, second line up. Procedures will provide for involvement of administrative staff, parents, and community members will use established selection criteria to contribute to the attainment, blah, blah, blah. Down at the very bottom of that same page, school library materials. All school library materials will be selected by a librarian using established selection criteria. And there might be at least one other.
So
So
the
I-
reason,
Whether it happens here or later, it needs to happen. It's referencing something that we don't have, so we need to have it.
right, so if you look at, hey, Dustin,
Then the AI.
if you look at the current IIA policy that the board's been, that the district's been using for a couple decades, it has selection objectives and selection criteria that the board came up with at that time. And that's why OSBA didn't define what the selection criteria is. It just references it because that's the local board's responsibility to come up with that criteria. So if anybody has ideas for criteria, now's the time to, you know, put it on the list. But I submitted mine, and some of these are Gary's and Chad's as well.
And not that we have to have it in there like as a whereas statement, but again, contextually. Can you walk through what where that requirement is coming from? That the board create selection criteria? I know you've already said it once or twice, but my brain's foggy right now.
Highlighted or?
Yeah, if you look at IIA, the current one that has been used for 20 years, there's selection criteria that's in there.
No, I understand that we have it. I'm going back to like legal authority or required, the board is, you know, it's in our wheelhouse to be doing that, like a contextual reference.
Well, how is the material going to be selected?
If OSBA moved it to the AR. So I don't know what the AR that for selection criteria.
Okay, so in the OSBA model sample policy, they had like
They're
2-page policy, but then like a 16-page AR or whatever, so it's in there.
That's what,
And that's where selection criteria is right.
and UKR is, you know, structural material, fiber material and such, it's like, you know, as you have.
I guess another way of saying it is like, for me personally, just understanding our requirement as a board, to me, it was helpful having the original kind of whereas stuff. We got rid of whereas, but the board is legally responsible for the selection of the structural material that came from ORS. Da 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 da. So when it comes down to selection criteria, is there something similar referencing the boards?
Yes, school boards are responsible for the instruction of the children in the school district overall. And that's why when you look at the current IA policy, there's specific criteria that's set.
Okay.
But I guess, are you asking for like legal references?
Yeah, I think so.
Because, and I could, if we need
Just-
to do that, I mean, I think we should proceed, but if we need to do that, I can supply that. I mean, there's, you know, it's typically not even in question that wouldn't be the case, that local school boards wouldn't be setting criteria for curriculum.
I think it's reasonable to say that in our current policy, there is selection objective, correct?
Or selection objectives and selection criteria. in our current
criteria.
policy.
So when OSBA went through and redid, they moved them to the AR. It's not, so I needed to read all the ARs because there's 6 of them.
Mhm.
So each one's a little bit different. Core instructional material that references the criteria. In the state of Oregon, there is a criteria document that's created at the state level, alignment to the standards, the different laws, et cetera. And so when for adoption, groups get together at the state level to create the state approved list, they review that selection criteria. That's what all the books, core materials have to be aligned to. And then, those books are put on the state approved list, and that's the list we can adopt from. If we don't adopt from the state approved list, we have to use that state selection criteria to complete an independent adoption and go through the entire process with that selection criteria that's laid out for core instructional materials. Selection criteria is laid out in the library AR, library books and classroom library books. Following, it just references library selection criteria, which we've talked about the criteria that library media specialists are trained with to go through the various library selection criteria. And so I think that's what it's referencing in the administrative rule. But there's no like these 6 things in any of the ARs. It references those criteria.
So I'm going to say we don't need a legal reference for selection criteria. What I'm going to say is the purpose of selection criteria for the District 7 school system is for us to say, what are our community values? What do we want taught here in District 7? We're not going to violate state law, but our community values are not the same as Portland. So selection criteria in our policy helps filter the material that comes into the district to align it with our community values.
Dustin, yeah, I think that's good. If you recall back at that document I sent, I sent some specific selection criteria language to Spencer Lewis, who's an attorney at OSBA, and to Rebecca, asking them, can the board use this language? And they basically said yes. They had some thoughts and ideas that they added to it. But the assumption, the assumption and the knowledge is that yes, local school boards create criteria for the curriculum that is going to be put in front of the students in that community. And it's one of the main purposes of a local school board. And it's the reason why if the state wants to come down and have standards that they want everybody to follow, they're going to set those standards. And where those standards don't speak, that's where the local education authority does and has the ability to. So if that, I don't know if you have that document in front of you, but there's some very specific language that I got two attorneys
I got 2 copies.
to weigh in on.
They do have it in front of them, Nathan.
And is that for all instructional materials? Or are we going each category one at a time?
The criteria would count across the board for all instructional materials that's brought into the district. As
I'm
long
gonna,
as long as
I want to speak up here if I can, Nathan. Does this include library materials too?
Who says this? What is this?
yes, it includes all supplementary.
Okay.
materials.
Then I'm going to speak up here and I'm going to get some pushback on this,
I've looked at it.
but I think this is way over the top. Okay, there is some of this I can go along with and there's some of this I can't. Some of the finest literature that you can possibly read has some of those profanities. And it's language that should be, those books should not be removed. And I'll give you an example, okay? The N word is much more offensive to me than the F word, okay? So me personally, I am really offended when somebody calls a black person the N word. Now, if I chose and I felt the community standards are opposed to the N word, we need to remove Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn from our library, okay? There are so many good books that have profanities. Now, when you get into the sexual content, I can go with some of that, but the profanity, I'm sorry, I can't go there.
Well, hold on, let's reset here and talk about what's actually going on. So it's, you know, if we've been following along with this, it's pretty clear that
Okay.
that the board needs to establish some criteria. So the idea tonight was to come up with some criteria. Because I'm remote, because I'm sick, I provided that electronically for discussion. So this is all for us to kind of go through and discuss. And I did put up kind of an idea of what it would mean to be pervasively vulgar, because there's obviously, you know, there's some ambiguity there, but that is a legal term that was used and federally, you know, gave school boards and school districts to prohibit material that is pervasively vulgar. And we get to weigh in on what exactly that means. So what I'm giving is a starting point.
Yeah, I can appreciate the starting point, as long as it's a starting point. But I'm not interested in removing great literature because it might have the F word or the word bitch or something like that in there periodically.
Yeah.
So I think we also don't necessarily need to have a policy that spells out that clearly, but we have a process by which people can review books and make choices.
That's right. That's why it has to be reviewed, and using whatever guidance we come up with, whatever criteria we come up with, it has to be looked at, and discretion has to be used in selecting it. So, and you know, I think the word pervasive is pretty important. Pervasive means it's reoccurring and all the time.
What does that mean? How often is reoccurring? I mean, to me, that's a very nebulous word, pervasive. It's not a clear word. So what does that mean? Reoccurring, does that mean 3 times? Does that mean 6 times? Does that mean once each paragraph or each chapter or what?
So, well, wait, I've heard that argument many times.
Good, you'll hear it again too.
Okay. If essentially what you're arguing is that if I can't decide if it's 3 times or 6 times, then I'm never going to decide and I'm going to let everything in.
No,
Is
no,
that
that's
what
not
you're
I'm saying a review process would take care of it. The
Okay.
review process will take care of it. The
So
applicant-
how do we say in the policy that we don't want excessively vulgar in a way that makes you comfortable?
In a way that makes me comfortable. I'd have to think about that, because
I
I'm
have
not
a
comfortable
quick
with it right now.
question.
And,
Can I-
and
I have a question.
But you don't want.
Killer
Eight-
Angels.
No, I agree with
That-
that.
that
There
came
needs
through
to be,
curriculum,
there
okay.
needs to be,
Killer Angels.
some
Yes,
guidelines,
It
absolutely.
was through curriculum. Was it a parent complaint? Or was it
No,
just
no.
a new?
New
required
adoption.
read? New adoption. Okay.
hey, Joe,
Yeah,
I would just say, you know, I don't disagree with you at all that there's ambiguity and we want to be careful because we don't want great books being thrown out. We don't want to be, you know, keeping stuff away from the kids unless we really feel it's harmful. So trying to dial that in is the key. So, you know, I don't even think we have to settle that particular thing tonight, but I think talking through it is going to help us get there eventually.
Yeah.
How do we hit that sweet
I'm
spot?
I'm not being critical of the process at all, okay? It's just that I am not interested in any kind of policy that doesn't allow for intellectual development simply because of a word or six.
You know what could be helpful too in the future, Joe, to speaking to that, is we could actually get material that federal law upheld. When school boards or school districts said, oh, we can't have this, it's pervasively vulgar, and it was upheld in federal law, it might be helpful to get our hands on some of that material and say, hey, what did the law uphold?
I don't disagree with that. I think it would be good to see some of that, yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there is quite a bit of it, so that could be helpful.
The other thing,
And yeah.
Joe, is, sorry, Nathan,
It's okay.
keep hold of your thought if I'm interrupting. Seems to me too, in something like Huck Finn, I'm assuming the N word's in there like 100 times, 1,000
least.
times, is it 1,000?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah.
That there's like a crossover of criteria where you're saying back up to critical thinking or cultural relevance. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a carve out kind of thing.
There's
Like,
cultural
not
relevance.
professionally vulgar, or with the exception of, or something. Like if there's if it crosses another,
If you read,
checkbox.
if you read books like, oh, what's the book? Bigger Thomas, what's the name of that book that, it's about the black kid that incinerates his, parent, I think. The character is Bigger Thomas. It's a great piece of literature on inner city, okay? On the inner city life in Harlem, okay? Incredible book, but it's graphic. The F word permeates it. But the F word is used in that setting a lot, okay? So are some of these other words. So when you start talking about cultural things, you can't just talk about Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer. You got to look at current stuff too, because you're going to want to understand current stuff too.
You know, I guess maybe one question that would need to be asked is, can you teach that principle? Can you share that experience? Is there an alternative resource for getting that message across to the kids without it being pervasively vulgar?
Not if you're going to capture the essence of that culture and create an understanding.
Yeah.
Can we,
Is it
um,
Native Son?
Native Son, that's the one I'm thinking of. Thank you.
Debbie, I want to go through these because looking at some of these, they are in our current policy. And I would like to maybe remove those as a bone of contention or a talking point. But Debbie, go ahead.
Well, you said something about waiting for federal precedent. And it seems to me the Supreme Court at this point is moving in the direction of wanting states to come up with the criteria. And there have been several states in the southeastern part of the United States that have taken a decidedly conservative look at book criteria. And to the point where, and you know, this is like my third point of why I'm not happy with the extra sentence about from a criminal prosecution. Or,
What?
I don't think that's what it
Or-
said.
That's not in there.
or,
That's two, and then-
That was in the other.
that was removed from the other policy, I think.
Including.
but anyway, the banning of books, basically the self-selection of some classroom teachers, of some districts and some states has been rather pervasive. And I do not want that to happen here.
Actually, Debbie, I was just one correction. I was referencing past federal laws that upheld materials that district says this is not age appropriate or it's pervasively vulgar. I'm talking about past ones, not future ones. There are materials that, you know, to help with this conversation, I was just mentioning to Joe, you know, if we need to get other materials that are examples of what the federal courts have upheld.
Yeah, I think precedents would be
available.
good to see, Nate. I agree with you. I think it'd be worth seeing that. And, you know, don't get me wrong, there are books that are in libraries that, in my opinion, have no business being there. So I'm not taking a real, quote, liberal stance on this. But I think we have to be very careful when we start identifying specific words, for example. Okay, I mean, there are titillating explanations of sexual activity that's downright sick, to be honest with you, and our kids shouldn't be faced with that. They shouldn't be put in a position where they're aroused by what the material is that they're reading, because that's not the purpose of literature that's worth reading, to arouse a child sexually. Okay, so I think we need to be able to deal with that. But there's also arousal in terms of the explanation of how drug use occurs. So books that make drug use heroic and might entice a child to say, hey, I might want to try that, you know, no different than the one you have here on violence and so forth and so on. There are limits, and I agree that, and I totally agree with that. So for me, the issue is, what's the process to ensure that the community standards are met when you put those books in? I have some thoughts on that, but I think that's potentially for a later discussion. I passed something out to everybody today, but I think you got to be real careful when you start dumbing down our society because we're concerned about a few words here or there. We just got to be careful. And I'm preaching. I'm sorry, but I come from an education background. That's where I am.
Go Joe.
Sorry.
0.18%, 200 times out of 109,571.
Huh?
Okay, so we also, I mean, this is new to us. It's fairly late. Do we want to continue? Do we want to?
I'd rather not stop where we are right now. It feels like we're actually getting somewhere finally.
Okay, I need a, give me a,
Personally,
everybody agree
What are we?
to
agreeing?
continue? To continue?
I think it'd be
Or just
helpful for me to go through kind of some of these, get through the whole policy, like we can. What do you call it? This bookshelf,
Table.
this, and then, but get through some of these other things where Gary keeps adding a section or. Somebody flags something and just kind of at least get it all out there.
Are you saying you want to table this?
Table the selection?
Well,
criteria?
basically, yeah, there's a
Feel like that's.
proposal of an added section called selection criteria. Somebody has an example. We're not gonna solve it tonight, but. Can that be tabled and then see if there's other, does somebody want to add like 12 more sections or? Can we make it through and see like structurally what everybody's thinking? There's some changes that need to be made.
Well, so I don't know if I really want to read this out loud, but here we go. As part of selection criteria, so I can get it out there so we can think about it for next time.
Comparing
If
these to these. So these are in the current.
I'm
And this is-
assuming in selection
is-
criteria, we're gonna
The one
have
we just got.
something about no
Can't find it.
pornography and that kind of stuff. Explicit sexual content. Those kind of things. I think that's
Thank you.
in the stuff Nathan did. So as part of the selection criteria, I would say to further clarify and support the application of these selection criteria, the district has established specific standards and objective criteria to ensure consistent and appropriate implementation. These standards define explicit boundaries to align instructional materials with the values and needs of our local community. 1. Explicit sexual content materials containing descriptions or depictions of human genitalia in a state of sexual stimulation or arousal, acts of human masturbation, sexual intercourse or sodomy, fondling or other erotic touching of human genitals or the pubic region must be deemed inappropriate and made inaccessible to students in any school setting. Threshold for objective criteria content should be classified as meeting the objective criteria only if it includes descriptive or depictive element of the objective criteria. Mere references to actions or topics without detailed description or depiction should not qualify. And so then it will be, up to the ARs and the people that implement this stuff to determine that if it says Tom and Fred slept together, that's okay. But if it says Tom and Fred did one of those objective things, that's not okay.
So does everybody have that language?
No.
No, I just read it.
Just read it.
Can we have a copy of that so we can hand it out so people can reference it?
I think that
We can
That-
talk about it.
I'm not exactly sure everything I heard, but that sounds allowing the AR to direct. Right, our job in the policy is not to micromanage, it's to set the standard. That's what I think I heard there. Is here's some selection, but not micromanaged, because that goes, you guys get to decide how many words per
One of the
minute.
things we kept hearing was that we say no pornography and everybody says, well, you can't define it. Well, here's our objective criteria for our community. That's the definition.
Are you not sharing what you read?
Well, I can give it to Tom.
I think we need to, if we're gonna look at these criteria, we probably need to look at them one at a time. One would have to do with sexual criteria, one would have to do with violent criteria, one would have to do with bad habit criteria like drugs or so forth. Unless this is the one thing that we're concerned about. I do have concerns with some of the literature, but I also have concerns with, I would hope that Papillon is in the library. Okay, there's a descriptive homosexual paragraph in there in the prison, in the book Papillon. But it's an amazing book that, in my opinion, is not over the top for children. So I don't disagree with you, Gary. I think there's some merit to your definition and doing it. And I think the idea of having the AR give us the opportunity to have a process where the community can say, no, that's over the top, where the community can say it, not 5 or 6 people.
Well,
but
Joe,
representation
we
of the
are
community.
representing the community. They expect us to make standards.
Pardon me?
We-
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with the standards, Nate. I'm saying that Gary's standard there is a good start, but I don't think it's the one that we could necessarily adopt tonight. We need to look at it, peruse it,
Yeah,
think about it.
yeah, what
Discuss it.
Gary read is essentially captured on number 7
Right?
on that.
Yep, that's what I thought when he was reading it.
And that would be considered sort of a backstop, an objective, hey, if this kind of pornographic material's in the material, then it's just a no-go. And anything south of that, then you take into account all the great things, the literature and the story that can be told and all of that. But what this would do was set an objective standard.
Well, the
Like
question I
Gary
get to
said-
again, though, Nate, is are you talking all or some? In other words, there might be one sentence in a book that has something like this in it. Okay, do you discount the entire book because of that one sentence? And maybe it's meant, like in Papillon, maybe it's meant to put an image in the eye of that reader of how horrible that prison is. And that reader needs to know how horrible that prison is. Okay, to understand the character's actions. I mean, it's a slippery slope if you're not careful.
So I
Well,
think,
this is a process to come up with a good product. So if you have good suggestions on how to get there, then that's what this is all about.
Well,
So-
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just want to throw out that there's a difference between an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old.
Don't disagree with you.
And material that I haven't ever read, so I'm not speaking to that specifically, but some of the things that I've come across are not things that I think the local tax base wants to be paying for to be in the public school system. Regardless of whatever literary merit someone might suggest they have outside of this setting, in our public library, outside of the public school, or for anyone to purchase on Amazon or any other book site whatsoever. Like, there is a difference between those two things. And so that's where we get back to the discussion on PICO and pervasive vulgarity and educational suitability. Those are the two things that school boards have been upheld in the court system for making decisions on materials based upon those two things. Now, yes, Nathan's right, you're right. Now it's how do we make that decision?
Yeah.
And if you get to a point where it's not okay for a 14-year-old, again, it's got to be a decision by the board, but it's okay for an 18-year-old. Well, then maybe it means there has to be a behind the veil of this section for 18-year-olds only, or behind parents allow their, I mean, now we're starting to get into like what this actually could look like. But if parents have authorized their kids to read anything and everything in the library, okay, then we've got a section that allows for that. I don't know what that looks like, but just to kind of speak to your point, that's a wide range that you're talking about, and that's just in the high school. This policy isn't for the high school. This applies to the entire district.
Sure. Sure.
Right.
I'm not opposed to age appropriateness. I think there's such a thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely is such a thing.
Yeah, and like I said, nobody expects this to be settled tonight, but you got to start somewhere. And, these
Yeah.
are the hard conversations that have to happen.
I mean, honestly, I don't know where we're at right now.
Can I ask a
Like-
clarifying question just really quickly? So I was told that this is where we want to insert selection criteria for on the back page. Okay, so I know that's where we want to insert. And then there's this information that was read to further clarify about the selection criteria. Is the thought process that this is only for you guys to look at, to read it through where it's not all chopped up? Is the process to put that in there, to read that as a whole, eventually with the selection criteria, so that when you get to the point where you're going to approve, you can read it as, is that what you're thinking?
I'd put it in as part of the draft and we can work on it.
Right, so that's what I'm asking.
What
Yes.
part?
This to further clarify and support the application of
Okay,
what Gary just read.
The Gary
Gotta
read.
add that with the selection criteria.
Nathan came?
Well,
Is that yes?
I'm gonna put it in there. It's just a draft.
To be able to see it.
Yes.
Put it in there so you
Yeah,
guys
sure.
can see how it flows. Even though you might take out 7 lines, or 5 lines or whatever, or reword things, you're gonna see where it's the selection criteria and then these 2 points. I just wanna make sure that's what we're thinking
Yes,
that I can do for you.
but we're not agreeing on
We're
that.
not agreeing to anything.
Yeah,
You guys are
that-
not voting
I'm
on
good with that.
anything. But it's just for the flow. Is that what I'm hearing?
So,
There's a,
so I've got, and I know I brought my notebook that has the tabs with, this is how it is, this is how it could be, this is how somebody else wants it. It's all in here. And now we've got several
Right,
That's what
pages
she's
more.
saying,
We're
to
trying
bring
to
it together.
bring it
So are
together.
you going to put in there what our current selection is?
I'm gonna go off of the OSBA policy, which is what you guys are making changes to. Okay,
Okay,
we already have the highlighted in yellow, which was agreed upon. I'm leaving that. I'm not touching it. I am adding the instructional material includes core instructional material, down to the right under definitions. That's what you guys wanted. I'm taking out, these materials are adopted. I'm taking that sentence out on those things. And then we got to here where I was told we're gonna add selection criteria
so
right here.
in the selection criteria, are you going to put what is in the current policy?
No,
What,
what,
and see, I think,
the first suggestion.
Yep.
To be
see,
torn apart
What-
later.
Starting.
It's the starting point.
I think that's great.
which Nate and Chad and Gary put together.
I'm not sure who all worked.
I
on
did
it.
not put that together.
Okay.
Also, that's just
I
why,
was just given this by Nathan.
which is why I wanted to go through the current selection.
Yeah.
Objectives.
So I think the
Versus-
current selection should be in there next to, or a separate page to be able to compare without going through all my papers this way.
Okay, so then
And
I'll
then-
put the current
then-
in and
Yeah.
the suggested. I'll
Yeah,
highlight them different colors so that you know
No.
what is what, and then you guys can go through that. I
I-
just want to
And
make
then-
sure.
and then does OSBA have any selection criteria that they have suggested?
They moved it to the
They moved it
ARs.
to the ARs, so it's no
And
longer
so
the
if-
policy.
They don't have anything.
They don't have
That's what I
anything?
went and-
So there are none.
Right.
Okay, so then it is left
They're supposed
open.
to because they exist outside of policy, the standards.
Got it.
So like core curriculum and library materials. It references those criteria of how they're established outside of the policy.
So I just want to make sure I just had clear direction on this, and I do. I feel like I have a clear direction on that piece, and we can move on, if you want to.
Oh, good, because I have a couple more.
I need.
yeah, so, but I like the idea and I want to emphasize it that you put the current, this is current. And then below that,
You guys are
some
just
board
seeing it
members
one
individually have suggested these.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the next time we publish and we have a meeting that's gonna be published, that this is what we're gonna be talking about, and that everybody's gonna say, well, the board's proposing this.
Yeah,
Well,
no.
It's not, these are.
Which is why I'm
individual,
looking at whatever this criteria is that
It
we
will
were
not be
handed.
published
No,
as far as an agenda.
Yeah.
It's not. part of it.
until you guys wrap it up. And you've crossed it out and done what you want. and
first
you said,
reading.
This is what we're doing, then it'll go to a first reading, but we're a ways from that.
So I have 1, 2, 3, I believe 4. That what this paper that we received tonight. Cross-reference with the current selection criteria.
Okay,
And I think that that almost separates them to the ones that are newly introduced. And that helps me digest it a little more. I don't know, I mean, in showing us together, we'll show what Tanya is saying.
Yeah.
But-
yep.
But to ensure all materials are aligned with the district and state curriculum standards is in our current
It's already
policy.
in there.
Right. Number 2 is suitable for educational environment and quality and authenticity is not.
Okay.
Ensures continuity and sequential from one education level to the next. Is. Materials that can be taught objectively fosters critical thinking. allows for viewpoint diversity and encourages students to be thoughtful and curious about complex and controversial issues is not really.
Well, it's,
That one.
so Cassie, I would say number 2 also comes off as selection criteria in the current AAR, if that's what if we're comparing that. So quality of writing, authenticity, production and format suitability. So that was related, that's just in different words. And then ensuring continuity, that's number 3, also references one that's current. Number 5 essentially references one in the current one. Number 6, I believe does. Or something close to it.
Well, which ones are not included? 7, 8, 9?
7, 8, 9 would be new, and those revolve around some of that language that is sent off to those two attorneys, essentially.
I think that helps us. So
7
you're saying 1 through 6 is represented in the current selection.
in one way or another, it's worded differently. You know, it's updated. It's not cut and paste.
So do you guys want to see the current wording and?
So
the
if you
wording?
look
Yes.
at 4, it says provide materials on opposing sides of controversial issues so that young citizens may develop under guidance the practice of analytical reading and thinking. So that's, number 4 is
Okay, so
tied to that, but I think worded
other
better,
than separate wording, new ideas are 7, 8, and 9,
essentially.
and then below.
These are coming on 2 sections, right?
Well, so when you say below, do you mean those definitions?
Correct.
Is there?
Yeah, so those are just
Read those.
ideas. I know that there's been a lot of
Done?
concern about, well, what does it mean to be age appropriate? And there's actually a federal definition that I thought could be helpful to us, and it's related to the sexual risk avoidance education, 42 US Code 710, that actually provides a legal definition of age appropriate. So I provided some stuff I thought might be helpful to the conversation.
I have a couple. One would be provide opportunities for staff, students, parents, and community members to review proposed materials and offer feedback to the district and board.
I'd like to
I like-
respond to that real quick. Do I have some thoughts at some point that I want to present? And maybe tonight's not the night because we won't have the time.
Can I hold you for 1 second? Gary, where do you see that
That's
drop,
just a selection criteria.
Tanya?
Okay, so that's not, okay, so can you say that again? I mean, that would be a number 10,
Sure,
okay?
I can give it to you later. Or you
Okay.
can listen to the
I mean,
tape.
right, Gary will give to me.
And Joe also had another one, drug use criteria.
Drug use criteria?
Yep.
I'm on that bandwagon, so if you don't want to take
Yeah.
credit for it, I will, but.
And are you
It's
gonna
one-
give me that? Are you gonna tell me what?
It would be gratuitous drug use,
As a number
depiction of
11?
gratuitous drug use.
Are
Does
you
not-
wanting that
does not
added to this
intention-
definition?
Does not intentionally encourage the use of illegal drugs,
Yes.
of drugs.
You're wanting added to the definition?
No,
or to a bullet?
number, it would be like number 10 here, you know.
Can you
That's
say
a
that
good
again?
one, Joe. I actually thought of that, but I'd already produced enough, so I didn't want to give too many.
Can you tell me your thoughts again?
Not opposed to the depiction of drug use, it's when it makes it look like you're a hero if you're using it.
And I wouldn't even use illegal because it could be
Just drug use,
alcohol and drugs.
just
Do
drug
you wanna
use.
draft something and send it to me for number 11, or do you wanna tell me what?
Number 10, number 11, is that, we're already at number
We're
11.
already at-
Yeah, Gary's got
These
13,
are
14,
only
15 coming up.
options to look at, or not.
I'll draft something for you.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down.
And just the general principle does not intentionally encourage drug use.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's what I call it.
And are all these things supposed to be in the policy, or are they supposed to be in the AR? I'm looking at,
well,
Well, I guess the answer is they're supposed to be where we want them. you know, that's a decision that has to be made. I know when you look at some statutes, there are some statutes that are quite broad and there are some statutes that are very detailed. For example, when they created, I can't remember the number, but when equity committees were created, the legislature actually detailed the makeup of those committees, which was, you know, pretty interesting that they'd go to that detail. So it's really up to us to figure that out, Debbie, I think, the answer.
I think it gets confusing
Um,
because they were originally in the current policy. And so
Right.
I think.
I'm just wondering
So
what
I-
Trish
Yeah,
and
they're-
Tim
Yeah, they're
think.
not spelled.
I would, I mean, I vote that they be in the policy themselves, like the.
I know that
current
you
policy.
believe that, so I'm asking someone else to get their opinion.
I think the intent is to make policies
Did
so
you get to give your next one yet?
framed in that all our ARs are going to follow the policy.
So you think looking at selection criteria in the policy is correct?
I
It's-
didn't say that. I
What's
said,
that?
what I said is that I believe the intent of the policy is to make sure that the frame work is so secure that our ARs follow the policy.
The ARs are basically how to challenge.
How to.
How to.
Right.
Because I think
Procedure.
we're into some people's interpretation of some of the criteria. I think where you place the criteria doesn't really
Okay,
matter. What's gonna matter is fleshing out what does it mean and then
Procedural.
how you challenge, how a patron challenges, like I don't agree with her interpretation of illicit drug use.
right, right.
And she purchased that for her classroom library and I don't agree with her. That's, I think, what the purpose of the ARs will be, to challenge that.
And it gets tricky when you are looking at, I believe, nonfiction autobiographical things that mention, for instance, some of these behaviors that are not models of virtue that we want our students to follow, but they are a true depiction of what an author went through, or a biographer is saying this person went through, and maybe how they dealt with it, how society dealt with it, how their family dealt with it. Which could be helpful for not a broad student population, but even a narrowly focused subpopulation might find helpful.
But if it harms other kids, it's not okay.
If they have a choice whether or not to check something out, it's different than being mandated by a teacher. These are different criteria,
It's also very different whether you
you know,
Seek that
and I,
outside of your school, right? You purchase something yourself, you check something out from the city library as opposed to a Grants Pass High School library, the North Middle School library, the South Middle School library, every one of our elementaries, like those are different things
well,
that
you
the
know,
public gets to weigh in on versus other things.
I go
Anybody-
back to, so what did I read in high school, you know, and I finally remembered, oh yeah, I read The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich. And there's a lot of behavior in there that I don't want anybody to ever follow again. Does that mean it should be taken out of the library? You know, and then I go back to our second paragraph under instructional materials and how we want to emphasize respect for the national flag. So when someone wants to study, say, the protests over the Vietnam War, where there was a lot of flag burning, are we going to say that's not appropriate for a 14-year-old.
Well, that's not, I don't think anybody's talked about that as a criteria.
Well, I'm just saying, there's a lot of slippery slopes that are kind of being brought up at this point.
I think they're all on the table. And I mean, they're all out there. And so I think the next step would be for us to get Tanya's document and be able to go through what is this and what does this mean?
So can I finish reading mine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Before you do, where is this next one gonna go?
Number
Or
12.
second?
This one's a selection criteria. I'll give it to you later, but I just read it out loud. It says promote viewpoint diversity and balance on political, cultural, and intellectual topics. And so I have two items for essentially the end of the policy. One of them, because of the pornography and that kind of stuff that we're trying to not have in the school. Pursuant to Oregon revised statutes and Oregon administrative rules, the district's comprehensive sexuality education program is governed separately. Nothing in this policy shall restrict or conflict with state mandated curriculum so long as it's consistent with Oregon law. Consistent with Oregon law, parents and guardians retain the right to inspect the curriculum and opt their student out of all or part of this instruction. So the reason I want to put that in there is we're going to say all this stuff about objective criteria, not meant to apply to our sex ed curriculum. So,
And you're thinking this would go at the end.
yeah, so I think that would be at the end.
Thank you.
We get a copy of this.
I'll give
Yeah,
you.
he's
two.
gonna get
No, no, no,
printed,
no, no,
Tanya.
no. Can we get this so that we can have it and chew on it before the next meeting?
So copy of what
What
Gary
you're,
gave me,
what you're doing,
what I'm on my notes.
putting it all together.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I have to work on that, so yeah.
No, I don't wanna be like. I'm okay. I don't expect
Give me
it
a
right
couple
now.
of days, give me a couple of
No,
days.
but I wanna make sure, I mean, it's hard when
Yes,
we need it all together and
Yes.
I appreciate you doing that. More?
Yeah.
Gary's got more. You did your homework.
This one's on the end also. The board remains committed to providing high quality, age appropriate educational materials that foster critical thinking, respect for diverse viewpoints and alignment with state standards, while also ensuring students are not exposed to content deemed inappropriate for their developmental level. This policy is intended to comply with the First Amendment, all applicable provisions of Oregon revised statutes and relevant administrative rules. Just so everybody knows, we're really trying to follow the law. And I will give you a copy.
I heard some similar wording as to the other selection criteria, the ones that are currently in policy.
Yep.
So it's just summarizing. Bring it.
So when we
And
start,
strike it later.
No, I like, yeah.
so when we start, when do we look at the ARs in this?
We don't, eventually we will, of course, but after we do the policy,
That's what I mean.
him and his staff will do the AR part. And then I'm sure submit them to us for review.
We have input on that. though.
No.
Well, I mean, I'll let Tim
This is
speak
your-
to the
this is your-
process.
Generally, most ARs, we would create the administrative rules that we're going to follow. It's got it outlined in the policy. We'd send them to the board at a policy committee and just say, this is what we're doing to
Okay.
meet the policy's rules.
Let me then, just to get my terminology right then, when we start looking at the reviewing of material, okay, would that be an AR or would that be just part of this policy?
I would think that would be the AR.
I think,
We're going,
For
So
example,
if somebody's challenged,
with the challenges and that sort of thing.
The challenge, the way OSBA has it structured is the ARs are all about the challenge. Later on in the policy, the, sorry. The core instructional materials, the supplemental instruct, there is a process defined in policy about how those.
Okay, that's
processes
my
develop.
question.
That's in policy.
Okay. So we will,
And then the AR is how somebody would challenge the material selected.
okay, I was just confused then. That just confused me.
Yeah.
Okay, I had put something together here because we've had this conversation in here about a committee that chooses library books.
Mhm.
Okay. That process would be in policy. Good, okay, I thought I'll discuss that when we get to that point.
You want to give,
I've passed something out for people just to look at in terms of my thoughts.
should we input that into Tanya's draft?
You can,
It's
Yeah.
a little bit different.
it's just, it's more talking points than it is actual
Yeah.
policy.
Okay.
Joe Schmidt, or are you sharing a reference here?
What's that?
Is this all you?
Yeah.
So this is homework for when we come back and talk about it?
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate getting the heads up.
Like this.
Where are we at?
Do we want to talk?
You owe me $1 because you said we're gonna be done today.
Today, still today. Don't push me, Gary.
So,
we'd be done. today.
so Tanya
It's
is
today.
gonna put
Before
all
then.
this stuff together, and thank you so much for doing that. A month is a really long time, and I think every time we wait a month to talk again, we forget things. Do we have time in our schedules to meet again before a month?
Keeper of the schedule. I'm gone the 20th to the 28th in Mexico. I prefer not to talk about library books.
From the 13th to the 20th.
So you'll be gone for our next meeting then, is there's one in February?
25th.
Yeah, so you're gone. Okay. So it might be better.
Get well, Nathan.
Thank you.
You have a job to do.
Oh, I hope so.
Then can we have one Friday?
This Friday?
No, I won't be here.
Yeah, what she said.
Monday?
Well, it is, I
I'm
once couldn't make it
Flying
to a
out
policy
Monday and
meeting.
flying out Friday and flying in Monday.
I once couldn't make it to a
Tuesday.
policy meeting and Gary told me I didn't
For
need to
the
be there.
budget committee meeting in the morning.
Thursday?
And
Gary told you what, Nate?
You
Is
needed
the
to be
fourth
there.
available? Tuesday the fourth?
Just suck it up and get there. I won't be here Friday, but I don't need to be.
We won't be here. None of us will be available.
Oh, that's
Yeah, we need to do this way fast.
No
So
Fridays.
the fifth, February 5th?
Wednesday?
Hold on.
It is a policy
I'm not
committee
scheduled.
meeting, not a
Fifth,
board.
that's a Wednesday?
That's my
That
anniversary.
works for me.
I suppose we've all been here at times.
Spent my
Board
last
meeting's
two
on the
birthdays
11th.
at board meetings. Wow.
You gotta let us know, we'll get you a cake.
Is February 5th work?
February 7th. What about February 7th? Like,
Friday?
well, they talked about this Friday, well,
February 7th, I would be in favor of. And then margaritas.
The 5th works, 7th is not as easy, but
Dustin, does the 5th
What'd you
work for
say?
what about the 6th?
Yeah.
February 5th
Does the
works for
5th
me.
work for you?
It's my anniversary on the 5th.
the
I'm sorry, I
other-
my.
I have a stand-in
What happened? I was afraid of that. It was you, Tanya, wasn't it?
system.
I knew somebody was here on their anniversary. I don't care. I care, but how's Thursday?
What's the 6th look like?
The
Thursday,
new leaders workshop, do you have to be at that?
Depends on the weather. It's a golf day.
That doesn't work.
Let's
for
do,
me.
I
We're
can
not
be
doing
available
it
during the
now,
day,
so
my
you can go
anniversary.
golf. You do your work, I'll do mine, then I'll show up here.
We could
This
do
is a
the
5
fifth
PM or
during the
later.
day. 5 p.m. or later?
I've given.
I can't do Thursday
meetings
the
that we've
sixth.
had This month alone at 9 a.m. I'm not giving up another half of a day.
I'm good the fifth or sixth.
Yes, evening, please.
The fifth is a better day for me.
Either one.
Me too.
So the sixth, by the way, there's an OSBA public meeting law. Zoom seminar that's evidently
Well, that's
a new requirement for us to have. To do
The training is,
training.
but not that training.
I think we pretty
It's
much
an
all will
option.
have it, because otherwise we would have had an illegal meeting and had this wrapped up and we never got.
So February 6th, does that work?
No, it's
No?
fifth.
No,
Why can't we do
the
this?
7th, the 7th.
Oh, Nathan can't do it. Sorry, Nathan.
What about the 10th?
We're not the fifth?
It's her anniversary. She's asking you not to have it on her
Oh,
anniversary.
she's going to Mexico. She can
That's
celebrate
later
when
in the
she's in
month.
Mexico.
How about the 11th?
If the fifth
Oh,
works for
Cassie can.
everybody else, y'all can call my husband.
How about Tuesday, the 11th?
Well, we have a board meeting.
Oh,
Let's do the fifth. It's fine.
another long one.
Could do the 10th. We're gonna do back-to-back days.
What was
I'm
wrong
good
with
with
it?
that.
So
can't-
nothing
I
the
can't
first
do
week
the
of
10th.
February, not the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
Friday, works for me. I don't know.
I can't do the 10th.
Okay.
What about
the
7th?
What about the third?
Did you guys have?
Hope everybody's
problems
giving up
with
their
the-
anniversary at some point. Which one?
Debbie can't.
You're
Yeah,
not
she's not
in
there.
town
She's
on
not
the
there.
third.
Cassie, Friday the 7th, I'm flying to
Um,
Utah for my son's wedding, and we're
I'm
flying
not
back
in
the night of the
I
10th.
don't get in till after 11.
That's why it's just really hard to get everybody here.
That's how this happens.
The fourth is a no as well.
Then it's the 5th.
Fourth is not.
We do the 5th and Cassie doesn't come.
It's fine. The 5th is fine.
Well, you
You
don't have
can,
to
you
be
can do
here.
what Nathan's doing, just be on Zoom.
Yeah, that sounds like a
Out to
fun
dinner.
While
anniversary.
you're in the
To be
sand,
here.
What was the 7th? What was wrong with the 7th?
I do not know what's wrong. with anybody.
Blur out your
Nathan's
party and
flying out for
stuff.
his son's wedding.
Oh,
The 5th.
that's fair.
Parties for anniversary? Yes.
It's our pottery anniversary.
When do you go to Mexico?
20th.
Oh,
It's
How about you
of
guys?
this-
February.
of February.
The 5th is good.
But you guys are really tired.
Gary, do we have all of your?
See what you-
Well, I
No,
said,
uh,
let's
I'll-
keep going because we're
I'll
finally getting
send
somewhere. I was
electronic
thinking
version.
about you guys,
Done.
but I also think we need to get somewhere.
Okay.
So I apologize a little bit.
The 5th, but we can have, we should
Fifth.
compromise some on our policy meetings and have them earlier in the day.
4:30.
4:30,
Huh?
3:30? We negotiating? I just was sharing with you.
Okay.
Did you read it? Passing notes.
And if I get this all done for you guys before, you'll look it over. right?
Yes.
Before y'all come on the.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Was that an if you get it done?
I will get it.
Okay. Thank you.
If I have to stay late, I will get it.
We say the 5th at 5 o'clock, is that what we decided?
I sent you an invitation.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you, Tanya.
Appreciate that.
All right, we're done. We're done?
Hey, Nate,
Yeah,
Nate, love you, buddy.
Wait,
likewise.
Yeah. Before we start
Good
loving
discussion.
each other. Attorney. Oh,
Thank you, everybody.
So we said the 5th, right?